Hello, and welcome back to another video version of one of my Substack essays where I read it aloud to you with the chat live here on Twitch, adding their own contributions. And of course, I also, in addition to reading the piece aloud, add descriptions of all images and links and things like that to make my writing more accessible to people who can't sit down and read 5,000 words in one go, people who are blind, people who benefit from having things in a portable audiovisual format. Hello, hello. And hello to everybody in the chat. Hi, Chicago. Sorry from the sound of it that you're having a bad day, but glad to be here to hang. Hey, Waluigi Bowser, a moral unicorn. Hey, Maddie. Hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. It's me, can't read, air gender. Uh, did you know that some writers do not read? That's going to be relevant to a certain internet famous figure that we're going to talk about a little bit briefly today in the context of cancellation, ooh, and the politics and tactics thereof. As you can see from the video title, we're talking about cancellation today. This is the first part in my, for now, two-part series on cancel tactics, the art of war. Today, we're going to be talking about how do you survive cancellation when you are canceled and don't make more of an ass of yourself or make your own life worse, or frankly, make life worse for anybody who is aggrieved with you. And next week, we're going to talk about how to cancel, how to effectively wield cancellation. Yes, the Lockheed Martin woke school scold Anna Mardal. I think we're far enough out from that event that I think we can talk about it and have a little post mortem on what we learned and what we didn't learn. Uh, kind of like the end of Burn After Reading, where they're like, what did we learn here? Well, I don't know, but we shouldn't do that again. We should not make an Anna Mardal, and we should probably not do what Kiwi Farms wants us to do in general. Also, even if we find somebody very very annoying and themselves a woke scold, but we'll get to that. We'll get to Anna Mardal, and we'll have some fun with that. Waluigi Bowser says canceled culture, streaming services and companies ending shows without a series finale. And cancel your subscriptions culture. Piracy forever. Quarian8, hello, says cancel culture, culture of canceling all our predatory subscription products. Okay, you just took it right out of took the words right out of my mouth. Yes, cancel payments, cancel credit cards, issue chargebacks, cancel plans. What else can we cancel? These are all great things to do. I was just as I was working on my piece on how to cancel yesterday, I was thinking about another blorbo of the show, Miss Clementine Mix. I'm sorry, Clementine Morrigan, and I think she's she they, so I don't know what article she uses, but I was rewatching our video, me and Maddie talking about Clementine Morrigan's shit, and when she went full turf. Last year, 2 years ago, in some of her writing about like youth transition and how we really need to start talking about how youth shouldn't transition because nobody's letting me talk about that. Uh, and Maddie had said something that I had forgotten in that video about how just even using the language of canceling, like trying to put all these various and sundry interpersonal conflicts, tactics, completely different, a whole bunch of different things that all get called canceling, putting that all under the single banner of calling it canceling kind of seeds ground to the right, who is always talking about being oppressed supposedly by any amount of like even liberal, let alone left-wing critique. And by the time I was re-listening to Maddie saying that, I had already written two and published one piece using the language of canceling, and I was like, nuts, like because she is right, but I do also think like in a kind of linguistic descriptivism way, like it is a way people talk about things, and it is a thing that like I hear enough like actually vulnerable people worry about happening to them that I think it is still worth talking about in this context, but like before we even dive into it, I do just want to acknowledge that even saying cancellation is a straightforward thing that always means the same thing. Like we do know, obviously, that's not true. Like I'm talking about a very particular kind of online phenomenon that can strike both large and small figures and can affect people's mental health and can sometimes be used as a tool of um, accountability as well. And we'll get it, and that's why we're looking at it from both sides. It's hard though. That's the conversation. We are beholden to the conversation, right? And it's kind of almost like a Overton window thing, right? Where once someone, once the language has been set and it becomes a thing people talk about, it's hard to refuse the premise and refuse to talk about it, uh, to be able to engage with the ideas that are relevant to what you're trying to say. So like there's a lot of things that people call canceling, and I do get to this even in this piece. People call things canceling when really what's happening is just like you have millions of followers and you said something incorrect and a lot of people are criticizing you, and that's not the same thing. There's a lot of like self-martyrdom, like white lady bullshit, again Clementine Morgan, that we see with a lot of people who claim to be canceled, especially people who are on the right. And I think, again, at the same time, there are people who do get targeted and ousted. And, people I know and love have been through that. People I know and love are going through that. And so it is valuable to talk about, even though we don't have great tools for talking about it. Um, let's see what else here. Consel, consensually celibate. Yes. Yeah. Why don't people, I never see that phrase. I guess you don't really need to, it's one of those things you don't really need to necessarily talk about that much, um, necessarily. Waluigi, yeah, I have those. I have those videos saved that you sent me last week's chat, and thank you for the reminder. So yeah, so today we're gonna talk about the ins and outs of being on the receiving end of a digital cancellation and the things that I have seen work and not work for people. I'm very interested in the kind of case study of individual people and how they manage their social presentation online, because that's just like the social engineering, evil manipulation autistic that I am, and also just like a masker whose way of masking is from just like learning social rules, not in the prescriptive way, but in the patterns of how people actually behave, the laws that seem to guide how people generally behave, and mastering them. So I've always just paid a lot of attention to how different online figures have responded to being criticized online and the ways that they really often make things a lot worse for themselves, just even from the most craven tactical level, like assuming they don't even care about the criticism, they still act in a way that makes matters worse for themselves. I think, ContraPoints and Lindsay Ellis are examples of that, where once you start like engaging with what you perceive to be bad faith criticism and creating this narrative of yourself that is about how persecuted you are, while you also won't stop posting about things that people are mad about and like people don't agree with you on in like really bombastic terms. Like, can you like why are you surprised at that point that people are remaining angry at you? uh and not all of that is like blaming the victim or blaming women for getting harassed, right? Like, and at the same time, those are both two very prominent women on the internet who have been harassed and threatened and held to a higher standard because they are women. Like, both of those things are true. Those are just examples of people who I've watched, been fans of, and also seen just really put themselves through so much unnecessary turmoil in how they respond to online criticism, versus someone like Philosophy Tube, who I cite in this piece. And I've taken a lot of notes from her, from Abigail Thorne, in how I handle certain things online, because she has been very intentional and very transparent about that intention, that she's just not going to engage. She's not going to talk about individual people because that just turns into public conflicts online. And she's not going to really engage with like any kind of mobbing or like mass criticism because it just reinforces the behavior. Uh, and she's someone who obviously knew a lot of these famous YouTubers and was coming up herself, kind of right behind them. And she studied what worked and didn't work for them. And she also had really close friends and colleagues like H Bomber Guy, who tends to be, especially these days, more out of the fray versus other people in that era of BreadTube who engaged more with criticism, had hashed out interpersonal problems publicly online, creating like hate mobs that would go from one person to another when they had beef. Uh, and that's just one world, right? Like I've also studied the fucking Dramageddon, Shane Dawson, Jeffree Star, Tati Westbrook stuff. Like I've seen drama play out in the slime community and how various people have handled that. Like I am fascinated by this stuff. And I have seen what works, and I've listened to some of the people like Abigail Thorne who have kind of an underlying theory of how to keep the heat from sticking to you. And so I wanted to distill those findings and talk about just a social engineering aspect that I find really fascinating, and also put it together in a little how to for people who are worried about this stuff happening to them, because it's always a possibility, especially if you're in groups that are targeted a lot. So like women of color, women in general, trans women especially, and so on. Airgender says, it seems like a lot of the people up in arms about the horrors of cancel culture are the ones with enough access or proximity to wealth and whiteness to be relatively unaffected by any potential cancellation, instead of being completely deprived of community or a support network. Yes, I think those are also the people who their voices are the most prominent, so they're also the loudest voices in talking about these things. I definitely know a lot of people where you will hear from them on an individual, personal level that they worry about being ousted from their local communities or being harassed on Tumblr, but they're like a small artist or just a person just hanging out. And so they're not some like railing against cancel culture as an entity. It's more like there are dynamics of social disposability that they face, that they are concerned by and have seen affect other people, or it influences how they move through different spaces because they're afraid of saying something that could be used against them in some way, or turned against them at the drop of a hat, because they're in one of those groups that's more likely to be seen as disposed of. But I think like what you're saying, Airgender, kind of reminds me, maybe because I was just recently rewatching that clip where James Baldwin is talking about how white gay people have this outrage to injustice. This is, I will make this make sense in a second here, that like white gay people feel entitled to the privileges of whiteness and all that whiteness contains. And so then when they don't get all of it because of homophobia, they feel cheated. And that's just not the same attitude that you move through the world if you're black and gay. And I think that is a general phenomenon that you see with privilege, right? Where people who, and that's where it's so easy for privileged people to have like a persecution narrative, because they feel entitled to move through the world with people showering them in praise, valuing everything they have to say, rewarding them for everything they have to say, and always supporting them. And so when they start to face, and people really bending reality to their will, like especially if you're like a white wealthy like celebrity or internet famous figure, right? Where you have been coddled to a really extreme degree and centered. And so suddenly receiving a lot of criticism or being held to any kind of standard feels like it's disproportionate. It's something that that you don't deserve, that you're entitled to better treatment. And it feels like an attack, because it is like a little bit of a loss of that power. Not everyone is being like a complete sycophant to you. And so it's perceived as a threat. And I think it's that same kind of dynamic that helps explain like white Christian people being concerned about the war on Christmas, or feeling like Christians are oppressed in society today because they are still the like hegemonic like power-wise majority in countries like the US, but they're not the only player in the world. Not everyone is a Christian. There is some pushback, and that feels undeserved because they believe they're like morally in the right always and should have their hands on all of the power. And so any threat to that, any criticism is just like completely seen as like outsized. Um, and yeah, so it does tend to be people who feel that entitlement to never being criticized who call themselves canceled for the slightest amount of criticism. And I've already said Clementine Morgan's name a bunch of times before, but like I think she is really a case study of that, where okay, you were involved in something that sounds like it was like a cancellation campaign where people were targeting, you know, your partner, and they had a website about seeking accountability from them and all of that. But also, people were just criticizing you online in a completely separate incident when you weren't posting about Black Lives Matter at a time when people considered that like obligatory. And that was just what people's like social media politics were at the time. And you can disagree with that, and you can keep posting like ads for your zines or posting about whatever you want to post about, and people can think that's like uncouth, and that's not you being canceled. That's people disagreeing with you about like what the agenda of the conversation is on social media. And God, what's her name? Carolyn Dooner, the Fuck It Diet. I don't think I've ever talked about this one publicly, but you know, I was on her podcast before she went like anti-cancel culture, and then she became this like reactionary, like transphobe, cancel culture person, um, and said that she was canceled because people were like mad at her for traveling during 2020 and like taking flights during the pandemic, which like again, you can disagree with people about what somebody's moral obligation is to do or not do during the pandemic, and that's not the same thing as them canceling you. And like you're not this martyrdom, like that you think you're the main character because some people were like, oh, you flew during a pandemic, like at the beginning of the pandemic. Like it's a it's a thing. um Waluigi Bowser is saying autistic people using the "but I'm neurodivergent and a minor" type of thing. People talk about ableism on the left, and yet to see the same thing being talked about, content creators having the same problem too. Yeah, I think like the self infantilization, self victimization, I think is, if I'm interpreting correctly, I think that's very true. Like that's such a dynamic where particularly white people and middle class people and higher in income do this thing of like just hinging on any form of like suffering or difficulty they perceive themselves to be facing or are actually facing, and use that to like absolve themselves of any like responsibility. Um, Air gender, yes, while parroting black abolitionist ideas with Clementine Morgan. Yeah, very cool abolitionist who tells people to sue people if they defame you, because you know civil court is not the same thing as taking someone to prison, even though there's still like judges and cops, and you're like legally required to participate in that system, and if you don't, then you are jailed. Oh Lord. Oh boy. Got me talking about one of my favorite internet punching bags. I'm canceling her right now by talking shit about her ideas that make no sense. But okay, before we dive into the essay today, I wanted to share a little bit of learning and biohacking, for those of you on the Piscord Biohacking channel, that I got from my singing instructor this past week. And that is learning how to exhale, which apparently I do not do, by blowing bubbles with a straw into any kind of, you know, vessel with water. What I have been learning, here's a little skill share. I'll learn and report back for you. I do not give up my breath. I hold my breath, which is very difficult for singing because it is breathing. And I do this all the time. I hold my breath all the fucking time. And that creates a lot of tension in your body and a lot of other problems. And it makes you feel very anxious and hypervigilant. Oh, thank you for the follow, Scolo Milla user 161. Thanks for being here. Oh wow! Oh, thanks for the raid, Bonmel. Hello. This is like one of my first raves ever. Just Mossy, welcome, welcome. Hi. How was your stream, Bonmel? Did you have a good time streaming? What were you doing? My goodness. Welcome, everyone. You have come in the exact right moment because we haven't really dived into the meat of the stream today. We are, however, going to calm down our bodies by blowing bubbles in water for a second. It's a bit hard since we usually speak German, so most of the usernames are probably German-ish. Welcome, hello, Bonmel. No, I know German. You pretty much just pronounce it how it looks for the most part. It's fairly phonetic, other than like W's and V's and the S thing that looks like a B. So I do. I dated someone fluent in German for several years, so I can probably kind of figure it out. So it's skull. Well, okay, I don't know what emphasis to put on what syllables, but so it's like skull o milla user. I don't know. Whatever. I'm not intimidated by German. I'll try my best. Um, Oh, this art gallery I'm on my way to just had an art installation up that had projections of this artist doing this exercise. Their name is Marisha Moodley. Okay, so if you have a lot of trauma, social anxiety, stress, if when you're around people you're like me, you might also not be exhaling. If you feel constantly out of breath, and you find it hard to even take a deep breath in because it feels like you have not expelled everything that's already in there, you might be holding your breath. And this has been a big barrier in my singing journey because to sing, you have to really throw out your voice and use all of it. Moist, welcome. Oh, excuse me. So, what we are going to do is we are going to blow bubbles in this water. It might spill a little bit in my face. That's fine. Free content. And we are going to do one long, continuous welcome subject. One long, continuous exhale for as long as we can, emptying our shit out, emptying our lungs out. You know, you should feel it kind of like flatten a little bit. It will sound very much like smoking a bong, Waluigi Bowser. You are very correct on that. And then we're going to just take a breath in and then we're going to do it again. I have been doing this regularly all week and it's better than any drug I have ever done at making me actually feel calm and relaxed. I can feel my Kegel muscles are like looser, which is great news. And like I was like hanging around with people I didn't know very well at an event that went kind of sideways on Friday night, like lots of social anxiety triggers. And I was like the chillest guy. I had my little skinny Virginia Slim and I was in my little glass of Chardonnay and I was calm around humans that I didn't know in an unexpected situation. So, all right, let's just do it. Whew, that was a long one. I must have already been holding my breath from talking so much and talking so fast. A lot of inhaling I've learned from singing lessons and research is like it's supposed to be really just letting the air fall in from the natural suction created from like the movement of your lungs and your muscles and shit. But if you are breathing very manually all the time because you have anxiety, then you're probably not doing that. So it should help you get a nice big inhale too. Let's do it again. Charlie's concerned. Yeah, how rancid is this sound on the mic? Is it ASMR or is it hell? I'm very curious. Feels fucking good. Um, and it's making me drink more water too because I'm keeping this motherfucking thing on me all the time. Um, what I am supposed to also actually do for my singing lesson, for anyone else who's interested in voice training stuff, is I'm supposed to do one long sequence that is bubbles, sing a note, or like hum a note, bubbles, hum a note, bubbles. So I might try that in just a second. And the note does not matter. It does not need to sound pretty or be anything challenging. It's about practicing moving air continuously and opening and closing the vocal folds and those things being kind of separate because I tend to just like I for some reason think it's like a portal. It's like an airlock that I think that I have to like lock up and open at the same time, my like breath and my speaking, which is not how that fucking works. Bon Mel says, I've done my fair share of exercises to help me with my emotions, and so much of it was just breathing and figuring out how to position my body in the space around me while also just letting my body move. It was so hard. This reminds me of that. Oh my God. Yes. No. Story of the last several months of my life, Bon Mel. Like, I have been just having so much tension that I'm becoming more aware of, which is good, but working on it is a mind fuck because I get so hyper vigilant around people that I'm just like locked in and not moving comfortably, even though I know what actually feels good for me and natural is a lot of like swaying around and moving and rocking and stimming and these little floaty things. And unfortunately, I am going to blame masculinity for some of this. I definitely got more locked down once I had it in my head that like, oh, I need to be a man or some shit. So like, I'm letting go of that. Uh, I'm detransitioning into someone who doesn't pass. That's another 2025 project apparently. But a lot of it is just letting go and letting your body move and like it's crazy how much more like just kind of like fluid and like relaxed and like sensual and like in my body I can feel. It's possible to feel. Like it doesn't all need to be awkward and inhibited all the time. Becoming aware of the tension is way faster than not having the tension. Yes. Well, like any, I think, physical skill thing, you go from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. And it really sucks to suddenly be aware of how bad you are at something bad, how much ground you have to cover. But that is a sign of progress. You're understanding the thing. And ever since my hand injury in January, I've been trying to get back in touch with my body. We're running, we're biking, we're eating, we're doing little stretches. We got the um, yoga ball on the back of the neck, rolling out all the tension. Another tip from my wonderful voice teacher, because this shit's all connected. I learned that I keep my tongue in the wrong place. I keep my jaw in the wrong place. Um, there's so much, but it all does come down to breathe, let that tension out. It's getting easier for me to talk for longer periods of time without exhaustion because I'm moving air more correctly. I still have a long way to go, but hashtag my bubbles. Um, do you still have tonsils? Not only do I still have tonsils, I still have wisdom teeth. Like a fool. I like have been putting off getting my wisdom teeth removed since my late 20s, but I have a consultation for it this week because um, some of my wisdom teeth are coming out sideways, right, I think pretty much right into the tendon in the jaw. So no wonder I have a lot of jaw tension that gets in the way of speaking and singing. Like, yeah, yeah, it's getting stabbed all the time. No wonder it's in pain. So we're gonna work on that. Though the pain in that regard has been lessened once I've started breathing correctly. Yeah, get those out. It only gets worse. Yeah, I know. I have a friend who the whole zone the ears, everything is fucked right now. And she got her wisdom teeth out a couple weeks ago, and I was like, oh, you can do that. I was just a baby who like relied on my mom for dental care my whole like first like 30 years of my life until she retired, and I just never I just never got like, I mean, I get cleanings, but I never went and got the wisdom teeth yanked out. And it's time. My grandpa's wisdom teeth didn't start coming down until his 80s. Oh my god. I also have a missing molar back here that just never existed. And so the molar above that molar is slowly just sinking to the earth. And that is so it's like longer than a tooth kind of should be. Like more of it is out. And that's definitely causing me issues as well, or it could. So, working on that. The method I learned is actually a method actors use, but they somehow figured out that it also helps autistics, people with burnout, depression, and addiction, since it's a method of getting the held up energy literally in motion, and it helped me so much. But yeah, things like tonsils, wisdom teeth, and stuff were a thing for me too. Glad they're all gone. Yes. I'm looking forward to having a little bit more real estate back there. I think it'll probably make a lot of things easier. A lot of things easier. So, I have just been so bad at taking care of my body because I thought, no, I don't have time. I need to focus on my life of the mind. Very, how wrong I was. I wish I could download a whole different operating system for my body because so much of how I use it is so fucked. Ibuprofen has a higher success rate than narcotics for mouth or tooth pain relief. That's great because I am trying to avoid narcotics entirely. I'm not interested in any of that whatsoever. I don't want to get constipated. I don't want to not be able to function mentally. All of that stuff. So, and I have some prescription strength ibuprofen already. So, hopefully, I can get these suckers yanked out soon. Okay, let's do like a couple more bubs, just for fun since we're here, and I'm gonna try it with the notes again. How the notes sound doesn't matter. It's not actually singing. It's just like humming to practice opening and closing the vocal folds while exhaling, and those things not being the same thing, which I'm slowly starting to figure out and retrain my brain. Yeah, I splashed myself there. Let's try it again. Okay, this is already getting easier. When I was trying to do it during my voice lesson last week, I was like, this is impossible. Thank you for being here for Devin Price's Biohacking Corner. Uh, all this time, I thought that I cannot trust my body, but I need to get my body to trust me first. Then I will reliably be satisfying its needs. Oh goddamn. Um, that's that's some real shit. That is, yeah, like I think a lot of us, if we're very dissociated from our bodies, we've been trying to wrangle it and suppress it and ignore it. And we were also told young that whatever our bodies were doing or feeling weren't correct because we had sensory issues or meltdowns or stimming. And so we have not been treating our bodies kindly. And um, like the good thing about this exercise is really that it is just trying to like restart in a way your breathing system into recognizing it can give up its breaths. So you get to a point where intuitively you're giving the breath up rather than having to remind yourself to do it all the time. And lifting weights is already easier because you need fucking air circulation in your blood, oxygen in your blood to be able to lift weights and and do anything with your muscles. And so turns out holding your breath the whole time you're doing push-ups is not the ideal way to do push-ups. Artistic Bum says, Def, ask your oral surgeon if blowing bubbles is safe after surgery. Uh, yeah, it's the suction with straws, for dry sockets. I think I would probably just not use the straw at all for a week or two afterwards, just to be safe. But yeah, I can ask them. Amoral Unicorn. I like the term Nick Walker uses body mind to explain what I'm trying to master. Could also just say biopsychosocial model. Yeah, and I don't think she originated body mind. I think, but like, um, I could be wrong, but yeah, like it's such a thing. Like the Cartesian dualism is fake. There is no mind body separation. It's all one thing. It's all the one animal. There's different systems working. It would honestly make more sense to talk about things like the parasympathetic nervous system or the digestive system or the endocrine system, which are all throughout the brain and the body. If we want to talk about separate things that like interact and also sometimes function more independently of each other, but like the mind, like this idea that we still have that's like so culturally ingrained in Western culture of like the mind is the rational thing that I'll be able to control, and it controls everything and I can fix it through sheer force of will, and the body is this irrational wild thing that can't be trusted. It causes us so many problems in like how we relate to ourselves and how much we ignore what we need. um, Another thing I need to get is a chair with actual back support instead of this dining room chair with a pillow. Um, it just it never ends. There's just so much that you need. I hate it. I find Slime Mage says, I find the trick that also makes me feel less tired. My office is underground and everyone at work gets weird about it when they see me going outside for a break. So the breath trick is sometimes the closest I can get, but it does help with the exhaustion. Thank you for the follow, Nocturnal Protagonist. Yeah, that's interesting. It makes sense that the blowing bubbles would give you more like oxygen to your brain potentially. Like I find it very relaxing, but it is also like invigorating. I've been doing it like just as a stim, like while watching my shows. Watching my shows just it's so satisfying. Artistic Bum says, I love my Piper song chair. God, I don't want to have to buy more things and stuff, and being alive is so resource intensive. It sucks. It sucks, dog. I interpreted my lack of oxygen as sleepy, but I think I'm fully just not breathing at work. So whoops. Yes. One thing that my voice teacher says is probably linked to technology use is that younger people, a lot of them don't take full breaths ever, like Zoomers, etc. Don't ever take full breaths, and it's definitely for me when I'm like zeroed in on my phone or something on the computer that's like a work task, I'm tense and not breathing. Yesterday I was doing really really good. Like or yeah, yesterday I was doing really really solid. Like I was writing the follow up to this piece we're going to read today. I was like so calm and like actually breathing and writing slowly, and what do you know, it was easier to think up ideas, pull forth examples. I wasn't pissed the whole time. So, yeah, we're healing, we're working, we're breathing. It's great. Um but yeah, we have to learn to be in touch with our bodies, and the way that we get that feedback is from like physical activities, the presence of other people, the presence of nature. Uh, uh, One thing that my voice teacher said to me is that people who didn't crawl have worse rhythm because something about like the foundations of early like crawling on the ground like this helps people's bodies internalize rhythm. So it was kind of a fucking read, honestly. She was reading me down that I was trying to just sing Randy Travis's Forever Ever and Ever Amen, and she asked me if I crawled as a baby. And I said I didn't crawl or walk or do anything for years, like other than talk. I made people carry me around. But she was asking that because my rhythm was bad. So, not escaping the white allegations. A buddy of mine became a yoga instructor before they knew they were autistic. Getting in touch is like a 500-hour course. Yeah. Yeah, you just got to start where you get in, where you can't, where you fit in, as they say, because you can't be perfect at all of it at first. And so, any kind of physical hobby or exercise or art, like the singing is great because the goal is, oh, I want to sing this song, and along the way I'm going to trick myself into learning how to breathe and relax and do things that I'm bad at. It's really nice to have um, a task that isn't just stop sucking at your body so much, you know. All right. So now that we've calmed our bodies down, why don't we get more tense again by talking about cancellation politics on the internet and cancellation as a social tactic, uh, completely neutrally, accepting that it is a thing that happens, that it's something we can use for good or for ill or for a mixed bag, or sometimes have maybe the right effect for the wrong reasons, to go back to the Anna Mardal case potentially, and read my piece aloud to you. So I'm going to screen share. Yes, it's ugly. Sorry about that. Oh God, there's me. And here we go. Here's the piece. It is free to read, as always, on drdevinprice.substack.com. If somebody, I can do it also. I can just stop my screen share and post the link into the chat real quick, actually. I'll drop the link in the chat and pin it so that people can read along or access it later if so inclined. We'll pin that for a good 40 minutes. Who knows? Who cares? All of my work is always free on Substack. Airgender says, about to go tear down my art installation, but thanks for the pregame and biohacking journey. Bye, everybody. Oh my God, Airgender, let us know in the Piscord server about your art installation if you haven't already, and if you have pics, we would all love to see on the Stuff You've Made channel. And everybody who's here for the first time, you'll see the Nightbot posts a link in the chat periodically to a couple of things. One is to my co-host and producer and one of my very best homies, Maddie Test Device's channel. So give her a follow at _testdevice or testdevice _ let me make sure I'm saying that right. Testdevice _ on here. And then also we have a Discord server for the chat on this stream, the Piscord, because we love Piscourse, discourse that is stupid and makes us pissed off and we're taking the piss out of, I don't know. And there's lots of, it's just a really great space, the Piscord, for neurodivergent people hanging out, autistic, trans, freaky people. We have a channel on there for people talking about crafts. We've had book clubs. We've had people stream like shitty movies. We talk about like NSFW stuff on that channel. We have outfit checks. We have people just talking about like self-advocacy in your like health insurance system and all kinds of cool stuff. So if you like the vibe here in the chat, you'll probably like the Piscord. So if you see that floating around, feel free to join that. But anyway, this piece, I published this on Substack on Monday, August 4th. It is called What to Do If You Get Canceled Online. Keep your cool, minimize the damage, and only make amends to those you owe it to. And I'm going to read it out loud to you here and give you some image descriptions for those who can't see those things. Feel free to keep dropping in thoughts and reactions in the chat throughout, and I will respond to stuff and highlight stuff as we go. It seems like the people watching the VODs of this on YouTube seem to like the conversation being more like free flowing, and people have been grabbing the Piscord link off the YouTube videos and coming and joining. It's just working out great, engaging with the chat, having people share their own thoughts and reactions to stuff as we read through. Um, so it's great. Oh, Air Gender says my art installation is weird, fucked up hair on a wall. Yes, we love it. We love art. So the cover image for this essay on Substack is a Unsplash stock photo of a bunch of points of lightning all hitting the ground. It's a dark gray sky, kind of a dark grassy earth. It just a kind of blank field in the darkness with lightning striking it, all roughly around the same place. The idea here that I had in mind is of being a lightning rod, being a single point that draws a lot of electricity. So that's the metaphor I'm kind of going with here. Unfortunately, all the actual photos of actual lightning rods on Unsplash were their paywalled ones. So I just went with a bunch of lightning hitting the ground. Welcome, Hey Zelda. Yes, you're just on time. And this photo was originally by Greg Johnson, courtesy of Unsplash. And I've pasted over it a screenshot of a anonymous Tumblr question that I got. And it was, any advice for coping with being on the receiving end of a public call out? And this Tumblr post, some of you may remember me getting months ago. And at the time, I wrote a much shorter list of things to do and not do when you get called out online, that I chose to flesh out and really source a little bit more deeply and develop more as an idea for this piece, which I've been meaning to do for a while, but I knew I wanted it to be dialectical, that if we were going to talk about being canceled and what to do when you are canceled, I knew I wanted to also talk about how to cancel. So I decided to write two companion pieces because cancellation is a topic that really inflames a lot of strong emotions in people. Almost everybody has a personal experience related to it in some way. And depending on your experiences, you might feel like someone who wronged me or wronged someone I care about, they never faced any consequences for it. When I tried to bring light to it, my community turned their back on me. People doubted me and questioned my character as the person who was the survivor. There are no consequences for really large and powerful people who hurt others. And that can be a very close to the bone, emotionally intense relationship that a lot of people have to cancellation. And I will say I have that experience as well. There's circumstances that I don't write about and talk about where someone who did something very wrong did not face any consequences, and all of us in that community who were advocating for there to be consequences, we were the ones who were kind of like thrust out, and the community just circled its wagons to protect an abuser. So people who that is your first and strongest association with cancellation, that like cancellation isn't real because people who do horrible abusive things never face consequences, I just want to first like say like I also know that experience. That is very much a reality for a lot of famous and powerful people who get so-called canceled. They don't really get canceled. They just like maybe lose one gig and then come back a few months later. So that is something that's very inflaming of emotions and is real. And also there are a lot of people who they have had an interpersonal conflict with someone. The person didn't communicate. Someone was triangulating behind their back. Or they were already seen as socially undesirable because they were awkward or trans or autistic. And all of a sudden they get called out online for something that nobody ever gave them the chance to understand or do anything about, or even something that could be completely made up. And then they are driven out of a community space, or people who associate with them are pressured to not associate with them, or they're accused of things that are just flat out not true. They're pedo-jacketed, things like that. And that is also a really emotionally intense association to have with the concept of canceling. It gets a lot of emotions riled up. You can have people who their political ideals and walks of life can be almost identical, but just because of like what is the thing that is most close to the bone for them, they can either feel like I'm in threat of being canceled all the time. Cancellation is this tool of social violence that's used to oust vulnerable people, or they can feel like cancellation isn't real. There's never any consequences for abusers. I sure wish cancellation was real. And like they can have very similar walks of life, actually. So I am going to offend both groups by having pieces that kind of treat cancellation somewhat neutrally as just a social technology that exists. Um, I'm joking about offending both groups, but like potentially I could, you know, by treating cancellation neutrally, it's potentially kind of rankling the feathers of a lot of people's associations with it. But I think what I'm interested in talking about here is just like the social tactics of how these things play out and how to navigate them and use cancellation as a tool if you need to, or survive it if you are faced by it. And so that's the idea. I'm a radical centrist. Yeah, you heard it here first. I want to hear both sides. Ugh. Like again, like Clementine Morgan said, if I could just get a TERF and a trans woman in the same room together and let them talk, it would fix all the problems. I don't understand why everybody's so mad at me. Uh, so that's part of the intentionality and idea behind this. But so this is only part one in the series. Part two, which will drop next week, is about how to cancel someone. You know somebody in power, you've been screwed over by an employer or some powerful institution. Let's go. How do you actually cancel someone and make it stick? Because that is also important. And how do you come forward with allegations and make it not hell on earth for survivors? That's next time. Uh, I struggle to form a reaction to cancellation sometimes because it seems so broad. What do I have in common with like Al Franken? Exactly, Slime Mage. And I think that's part of the point that Maddie was making on our stream, where we've talked about this in the past, and it's something that Stevie Lang has written about, and others, that like cancellation is such a big bucket of terms, like of behaviors and phenomena. Uh, Trashing, which I'll talk about in the piece, second wave feminist trashings. People used to just like oust people, like these things sometimes just happen and they're not even like they didn't all get to used to be called cancellation. And that's very different from like, oh, a bunch of people are protesting a show because there was something racist on the show. And those things all get called canceling because that does serve kind of like a conservative ideology that like any criticism from marginalized voices is mob violence, right? So that's why they call it all canceling. So there is like a political slipperiness there, and it sucks to have to navigate it and to have to grapple with the term because as Maddie was saying in our last stream on it, like even the use of the term is in some ways kind of, if not ceding ground, it's playing in a territory that reactionaries and conservatives have created. Hello, Trans Peaks. It's good to see you. Good to see you. Good to have you here, chipping in with any thoughts and reactions to stuff as it suits you. Von Mel says, if it was a German talk show, it would be only TERFs. I wish I was joking. That's what I hear. I definitely hear it's quite turfy there in a lot of ways. Personally, the thing I have in common with Al as a Minnesotan is that I wish he didn't resign. Oh, that's a bold take. That's a bold take. But God, it's been years since the allegations against him, so it was mostly what was like groping. I mean, at the time I was very like, fuck him. But if it's more complicated than that, let me know. Your article definitely reminds me of hot allostatic load, and it mentions trashing too. Yes, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Porpentine, especially her games. I've read Hot Allostatic Load by her multiple times, and that speaks to a real experience that a lot of people have, especially people who are trans feminine and people who have like who are neurodivergent or mad in some way that is like very easily visible or single outable to people. So plus there's the personal. I lost my housing. from a messy breakup turned cancellation, but I was canceled by 24 people max. It means nothing to the world. It means nothing to me now. But when I was 20 and homeless, yeah, massive. Welcome, Emerson. And what does that have to do with famous people losing commercial gigs? Right. It's kind of stolen valor for like, I don't know, some famous person to say they were canceled when they like still have a house and like record sales and all those things. A pic with a sleeping woman pretending to grope her. That's all it was. Okay, I thought there were multiple instances, but if it was like just the picture that I do remember people saying it was like a joke, um, then fair enough. Uh, yes, and there's the link. Test device just put in the chat to the video where we talk about Clementine Morrigan and canceling, and and just if you like mess a little bit, and Clementine Morrigan being a turf and all these things, there's a lot in there. It's like at the 3 hour ish mark. There's a link in the chat of the video for people who want to watch that. But okay, diving on in. In my time as a public figure, I have been criticized, misinterpreted, accused of having positions that I do not have, and of doing things that I have not done, been stalked, had threatening physical mail sent to my office, had critics of my pro-Palestinian stance report me to my university president for anti-Semitism every single day for months, been investigated professionally for bias, and been threatened with legal action for calling out ethical issues within my field. But despite my often freewheeling approach to digital exposure and my penchant for provocative takes, I have never been canceled or really had any kind of mass public censure really stick. From massively popular YouTube celebrities to niche fetish bloggers, I've seen what mass criticism does to a person. The persecution narrative and all body stress it can inspire, the many ways that a canceled person's panic response can lead them to make matters far worse for themselves, and further infuriate those that are already angry with them. I have seen what works and what doesn't when responding to mass public criticism. Taken notes from the handful of especially shrewd and self-controlling online figures that have managed to dodge a cancellation's bullet once it was out of the chamber, and combined this knowledge with my understanding of group dynamics as a social psychologist. Based on all of this, I have developed a general strategy that I would recommend to anyone who wants to keep themselves feeling relatively steady when a large number of people are mad at them online. And that is much more general language, feeling steady when a large number of people are mad at you online. It's really easy to get into the weeds debating, is this a cancellation? Is this not? Is it just criticism? And we'll get to that a little bit more in the piece. But I think it's important here to just highlight that when a large number of people are criticizing something you did or are mad at you, psychologically that has an effect, regardless of whether there is a kernel of truth to it, if a lot of it is very legitimate, if people had legitimate grievances with you, but then it blew up into people sending you death threats. As Artistic Bum says in the chat, that's plain harassment. And often harassment and threats does come when a person makes an actual mistake online and gets critiqued for it. There's both the criticism that people get that is legit, and then there's a few people who maybe already had it out for them, or maybe are just themselves especially triggered, who knows what, who are sending threats and are actually genuinely harassing someone. And when you are in the throes of it, you can't really easily distinguish between the two. If you're getting thousands of messages every day and 700 of them are, here's what's wrong with the turn of phrase you used or the example or the comparison you made, and I'm explaining it, and like 300 of them are like, die bitch, I hate you. Like, obviously a person's mind will equate those things, and often the ratio isn't even like that, right? Often the ratio is the majority of people are somewhere on the scale of like pissed off, but like treating you a way that is acceptable to treat other human beings, and that includes being mad. Like, you can be mad, you can swear, you can even yell at someone, and that's not wrong. But if there's just a few messages in that bucket that are like, here's pictures of your house, I'm trying to get you fired, here's like misogynistic art of me killing you or whatever, you can really gloss over all of that and see it as all the same thing. And for a lot of online figures, they start responding to any criticism as if it is a threat. And at some point that comes down to like boundaries are a thing you do. Like you as a creator have to figure out how you're going to handle it if you can't really take in criticism rationally at all and distinguish between just disagreement and harassment. But also like that is a thing that's on the table that does happen. Transpeak says Clementine Morrigan is a frustrating example of how often talking about the harms of canceling leads to people avoiding any and all accountability. Striking a balance is tough. Exactly. And once you have that narrative in your mind that I am canceled, I am persecuted, then anytime people disagree with you, it's you just being re-canceled again. And I do believe that even for Clementine Morrigan, who I don't have especially charitable things to say about, like, that some of it is that trauma response of misinterpreting things and just like not feeling regulated whenever she's criticized. But it's also something she profits off of. She has decided to make her whole identity her cancellation trauma, which is not a healthy trauma response, generally speaking. It's going to keep you kind of stuck in a certain phase of dealing with things and not moving forward. And it also becomes a story you can tell over and over again. And there's no reason to break out of that when it's your podcast, it's your zines, it's how people know you. And it's sad. It's really sad when you see people do that. And to a lesser scale, a lot of like internet famous people absorb that narrative about themselves. When it comes to cancellation as a social tactic, I am completely neutral, and I will be addressing it neutrally in this piece. I do not believe, as some social justice-oriented thinkers do, that cancellation is not real or that it is merely accountability. People close to me have been forced out of queer and artistic communities because someone with more social power demanded that the collective cut them off urgently and for vaguely articulated reasons, and threatened other vulnerable people with social ostracism if they did not comply. I have been in the middle of that. Often, abuse accusations are not taken seriously, and cancellations don't do a thing. It's true. But sometimes a person is accused of abuse by their abuser. Or powerful people bring forward allegations of wrongdoing in order to oust a person who is already broadly disliked in their communities because they are creepy or awkward or visibly addicted, mad, or neurodivergent. And it does ruin their life. I think probably I'm not the only person here who has moved through like a believe all survivors, believe all women phase of approaching things like sexual violence, having believed that very strongly and dogmatically and really carried out that value for years, and then reaching a point where somebody had darvoed, somebody had reversed offender and victim and had gotten out in front of their victim coming forward and accused their victim of being an abuser or something of that nature that kind of throws you and throws that whole worldview up on its head, where you really eventually have to sit with the fact that you do not know things that you did not experience and were not there for, and that people do sometimes lie about these things. As rare as it is for survivors to face justice, also sometimes people who are leveraging power over another person will use some of that language in an opportunistic way, and it really sucks because then there's no hard and fast rules for how you're supposed to behave and what the right thing is to do. And sometimes you'll never know the truth, and you still have to make decisions. Online, nearly every trans woman writer that I follow has been accused of being a predator, abuser, or pedophile at some point, usually by a mass of strangers that does not even know her. Some of the women put in such positions have had to relocate cities, delete their social media profiles, and put a pause on their creative careers. I have had friends run out of their cities because they made art about being raped that people online criticized as glorifying sexual violence. I have seen trans people and DID systems be labeled en masse as creepy and deceitful when they started dressing and speaking differently from how they used to. I trust we all remember the mass public censure that drove Isabel Fall off of the internet and out of writing science fiction. And I'm sure lots of us participated in piling on Anna Mardal because he works at Lockheed Martin. So let's take a moment here to orient the viewer, listener, reader to who these figures are in case you don't know or need the little jolt to your memory. Isabel Fall is a trans woman writer um, who wrote a story called I Sexually Identify as a Attack Helicopter, which was published in the science fiction magazine Clark's World. The title, I think, is pretty obviously a reference to the conservative meme mocking trans people by saying they identify as attack helicopters. But the story itself is also a real criticism of the military industrial complex. And it's about a person who becomes basically one unit with the attack helicopter that they pilot serving the military, and how like erotic becoming one with that attack helicopter feels. It's obviously, I think, very tongue-in-cheek. It's very arch. It's very much a critique of imperialism and military violence, and it has this transhumanist edge to it. And I think it's a great story. Like, you can still find mirrors of it online. I think it's really well written and funny and sharp, and like, to me, obvious what it's doing. But because it is art that doesn't tell you straightforwardly on the tin, mocking trans people is bad, the military industrial complex is bad, people didn't always know how to take it. And because Isabel Fall was a very private person and she didn't have a lot of information about herself available online, a lot of people on Twitter, particularly trans people who don't experience trans misogyny, uh, took to criticizing the author of the piece, questioning whether she was even really trans, whether she had the right to write a story like that, questioning why she didn't provide more information about herself online, saying that the story was offensive to non binary people and trans people, and demanding that Clark's World take it down. And Isabel Fall, we now know she was a trans woman who was just beginning to approach coming out. That's why there wasn't a big digital footprint for her. And this story was part of her exploring and finding her voice as a trans woman creative coming into herself. But the backlash was so aggressive and cruel that she pulled the story and she disappeared from public life. And so she was this example that I think, even in kind of like left leaning trans circles, we can generally see as an instance of just cancellation based on people interpreting anything that was even remotely ambiguous or vague in the worst possible light, making really extreme demands, not being able to sit with the uncertainty of a complex piece of writing that doesn't tell you exactly how to interpret it, and going in this incredibly dogmatic fashion at the author of it. So very high profile instance of a cancellation. And incidentally, our second cancellation figure here, Anna Mardal, was loosely involved in the cancellation of Isabel Fall. He's deleted a lot of his tweets, so it's a little bit hard to get the full breadcrumb trail on it. But But Anna Mardal did participate in saying that the piece was offensive and should be taken down and sharing things to that effect, which is real rich because uh, he was advocating to have a story criticizing the military industrial complex taken down. And he, it turned out, worked at Lockheed Martin. This is just a post about Anna Mardal and his cancellation on Lindsay Ellis's subreddit. But for those of you who do not know, Anna Mardal was and is to an extent a social media figure who was very active. You would probably most know him by this profile picture. Heavy Twitter user, kind of infamous for having certain kind of like hot takes of varying degrees of impact on the world. One of the more famous ones was saying that some people who write don't read. There's a thread going around mocking writers who don't read very much. And I'm trying not to haul out my soapbox, but this is ableist. Not everyone can read for pleasure or indeed at all, and some of those people are writers. This is just like a soft one that people kind of made fun of. I think actually, honestly, that is true, right? What he's saying, but like he, in this case, but he is someone who would get clowned on online a lot for having takes that people saw as like the most extreme version of the easily offended blue hair pronoun haver kind of thing. So there's part of that in there for why everything he did drew such ire, including from other trans people. But he was someone who also would make really kind of strong stances and moral declarations about how a person should and should not act and what they should say and not say. Anna Mardal, for example, is the source of the idea that you shouldn't say NB, the initials NB, to mean non-binary. Let's see if we can find that one. It might be pretty hard to find. I have tried to track down because basically his assertion was that you shouldn't use the letter NB to represent non-binary because that means non-black, like in the context of a non-black person of color, and that word, that acronym, that combination of two letters has already been claimed for that purpose, and so it's inappropriate and racist to use NB to mean non-binary. When I saw that take and I saw people pushing that around, I thought that really doesn't really make sense to me. Like, it's very contextual. Nobody identifies as NB. They use, in terms of like non-black, they use it to describe their positionality as a person of color who isn't black, but it's not like a central identity thing that somebody's like using all of the time. Like, usually it's very contextual and you can tell when somebody's saying they're a non-black person of color versus when they're saying they're non-binary. And like, also, I don't think you can really practically like claim acronyms of two letters and say that they're only for one use ever. Otherwise you're like being like biased. So I tried to dig into like, where did this claim come from? Are there groups of like people of color who are saying this? And it all tracked down to Anna Mardal, who is white and would sometimes make certain declarations about like racial justice and social justice and what you need to do, and criticizing people for not doing things his way that would be pretty extreme. Woke scold was a term used in the chat, and I think that's fair. And he also is someone who was constantly raising money from Patreon subscribers, asking for money to pay for his surgeries, his partner's surgeries, living expenses. When they moved here to Chicago suburbs, the two of them crowdfunded for that, often presenting themselves as being in need of a lot of financial support. And it later came to light that actually this whole time Anna Mardal was working for the weapons manufacturer, the weapons subcontractor Lockheed Martin. That he was a nepotism hire from Lockheed Martin, and that he does have like financial support from his family who works for the weapons manufacturer. and that he had been carrying out the creation and distribution of the tools of empire and of genocidal violence, and didn't seem to have any kind of ethical problem with that as much as he had a lot of very strong ethical stances about what words you should use and not use and things like that. Um, and he really asserted that he needed to keep this job because it's part time, and he's disabled and needed a remote work from home job that would give him insurance and let him work 10 to 20 hours a week, which that is a difficult position a lot of disabled people are put in. But I think a lot of disabled people responded to this by saying that like they would still never choose to work for the genocide store. Uh, and so then he was pretty roundly canceled after that came to light. It was brought forward by Kiwi Farms, the transphobic and many other things site, fatphobic lol cow site. But after kind of reactionary conservatives brought forward this information about Anna Mardal, oh, he works at Lockheed Martin, oh, his parents co-signed his house, all this stuff that suggests a degree of privilege and complicity in genocidal violence that he never let on. A lot of lefty trans people also came for him really hard. It became quite a big joke and meme on Twitter at the time in 2022. And then he shut down his Twitter, really locked down all of his blogs and social media accounts, lost a lot of Patreon subscribers, and was no longer this voice that he once was. If you're not in literary Twitter social media circles, I think it's easy to discount how much of a influence Mardal really was on like other liberal writers. Lots of writers followed Anna Mardal. Lots of YA fiction, romance, fantasy, genre fiction people in publishing. And if he said using a certain phrase is transphobic, or doing a certain thing is ableist, or doing a certain thing is racist, a lot of people took him as an authority on that, even though by all accounts he really seems to be someone who has never been in community with other trans people in real life in any way. He doesn't live as himself socially anywhere. Make of that what you will. And works for Lockheed Martin, and with a family that works for Lockheed Martin. So he's been kind of broadly seen by a lot of people now as a grifter, pretending to be this voice for like social justice online, who never really believed in any of that, or really walked that talk, and was getting a lot of money from fans and Patreon supporters the whole time. Let's catch up with the chat here before we dive in further, because there's been a lot of interesting stuff to get into. So this is going back to talking about Believe All Survivors. I used to be a Believe All Survivors guy until I accused innocent people of abuse while going through psychosis. And since then, I've seen my trans women friends falsely accused of assault, and how detrimental it was to their mental health. It's just so much more nuanced than I realized. Yeah, and trauma can do that too. Like, if you really shut down as a trauma response and you can't communicate, sometimes you can have a traumatic sexual experience where it would have been impossible for the other person to know that it was traumatic for you or that they did anything wrong, because you're fawning and frozen and like, but not in a way where it's visible that you're having a trauma response. So the person, from what they're seeing, you seem to be having a good time, or you're not communicating with them. And it can still be this awful traumatic experience for you, and also they didn't do anything wrong. Like, there's so many different ways that it can be so complicated. Bon Mel says, it's the most easiest approach, Believe All Survivors, if you do not have to reflect on power dynamics in your own spaces that, yes, do not function outside of society, but where power and hierarchy is sometimes different than in the overall society. With that all or nothing approach, there's almost no way to talk about that. Right, and also the power that a person holds, it is very contextual. So, and people will sometimes use quote unquote identity politics to blur lines like class. So I've seen, white women in professional settings who they're a manager, they have power over people, they'll say, believe all women when they're the one that's like lying and taking advantage of people that work under them. Just as an example. Transpeak says, in my opinion, believe all victims means that you don't deny someone's experience when offering support. It doesn't mean that everyone making an accusation is correct. Yeah, this is something that Sarah Casper of Comprehensive Consent also talks about a little bit. That, like, if somebody's coming forward as a survivor, what you know is that they need support. And you don't even have to believe someone's quote unquote story of what happened to believe that they are in distress and they need support. And that's such an important thing. And like sometimes it's the nature of your relationship and your position that will inform what you should do next. So if someone who's a dear friend to me comes to me saying that they've been assaulted or abused or they're in a domestic violence situation, like even if some of it doesn't add up, that's kind of not my problem. My role in that is their friend, and so what I'm going to do is take care of my friend. Like I'm not there to investigate things. I'm not there to like be the Undertaker and like deliver justice or whatever the fuck. Like I'm not there to figure out to get down to the bottom of things. Like I don't and I'm not there to defend the person they're accusing either because that person's not my friend. I'm there for my friend, you know. Sometimes your position in reality is itself biased, and that's okay. Like you should just work your own little corner, keep your side of the street clean. And like that means if somebody in your life is distressed and they need support and they feel victimized, like they need care regardless of what's true. And if you have that close relationship with them, you can be the person to do that. And sometimes you don't need to know the truth. Like that, the older I get, the more I really embrace the not knowing and not being in charge of everything. Sometimes all you can do is just show up and do your little part. And if you're helping somebody who's hurting to heal, that is a net good. Even if there's somebody who is throwing around false accusations, let's say, they clearly need support. The world is really not ready to talk about ableism in all its ways and the radical perspective change you'd need to really question your own ableist worldviews. Yes. People laugh at accusations of ableism, and they use people like Anna Mardal as like a punching bag for some of those criticisms. And there are times when people do use ableism as critiques of ableism to like justify certain things that are like financially exploitative, like bullying someone on TaskRabbit or like who didn't pick up the correct groceries for you or whatever. But like there's so much, like, to even talk about that, you have to talk about how pervasively ableist society is to get to a point where the only way for a disabled person to get their groceries is to yell at somebody on TaskRabbit, so yeah, people really don't want to contend with it. When I falsely accused people in the past while in psychosis, the most helpful thing other people have done was just fully listen to me. Absolutely. You still need that support. Like, to you, that is reality as you're going through it, and you need help with that reality. Slime Mage says, I think a very large chunk of the woke is so sensitive, so offended is a specific subset of white folks still struggling with the right to comfort pillar of white supremacy, which glass house owner throwing rocks, but it makes the rest of those takes make sense. I think that's very correct. Like, I think, and unfortunately those, for reasons we've already discussed, those kinds of white people tend to be very vocal. They tend to have large audiences and be trusted and listened to. They can self-victimize and self-martyr to get even more attention and platform. And so then, like, the face of a lot of like social justice movements is someone who's like the least equipped to be trustworthy on it or to handle any pushback or critique. And it creates a lot of issues, like Anna Mardal, who, I don't know the guy in person, but it sure seems like from everything we do know that he is like a person who moves through the world with certain advantages and privileges and is very detached from a lot of the communities that he attempts to speak for, especially when it comes to race. And and then people mock any kind of like anti-racist or anti-ableist movement and like act like those people are all Anna Mardals, um, when it's like, no, none of us claimed him in the first place. What I read was that's why especially white non-binary are asked not to use NB for their identity, but NB. Yes, trees and lanterns, but this was made up by a white person. That rule about white people, like white non-binary people are asked not to use NB. Who's asking them to do that? Anna Mardal, a white non-binary person. It's made up. Like there are no communities of people of color that are saying don't use NB to mean non-binary. Like I've tried tracking it down a million times because it really didn't make sense to me, but I wanted to be able to make sense of it and see if like, okay, are there like a number of people saying this? Because there is no single arbiter of like what's the correct thing to do on racial justice, right? Like no one person decides that. Like if I'm gonna follow a rule, I want to use my own discernment, take in a bunch of perspectives, understand why it's a rule, and like decide for myself. Okay, I agree with it. I'm gonna do it. And I dug and dug. Others, don't trust me. Do your own digging. Best I can find, this is a rule that white non-binary Anna Mardal made up, put online. It spread like wildfire. People started using it to correct other people, and from where I'm sitting, it still does not make any sense to me that you can say that two letters together can only ever represent one thing, that's only used in one fairly limited context. And so I think that battle is now kind of done for the most part, but every now and then I still see people bring it forward and say like, oh, well, people of color would prefer that we do this. And like, I, I have never seen the people of color actually demanding that. I've seen Anna Mardal do it. Um, yeah. Respect survivors rather than believe. Yeah. Aquarian says, to me, it feels more about honoring the person's needs or relationship to each other rather than implying anything about objective truth. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, nobody knew that that came from a white guy, trees and lanterns. Like, people have passed it around as a truism for a long time. And, like, that's the degree of impact that Anna Mardal had. Like, he set down some rules and were like, say this thing, don't say this thing. Like, there's several different cases of things like that where he was such a Twitter power user that was so influential that, like, things that he said were, like, right or not right to do became very prominent. Yeah. Um, Waluigi Bowser says, all of this ableist stuff y'all are talking about right now is a problem that neurotypical people struggle with. They have this oversimplification over nuanced situations with their black and white thinking, and this type of shit puts an innocent autistic and neurodivergent people in trouble. I think people, they want there to be hard and fast rules for what to do, because then they don't have to think any further, and then they don't have any personal responsibility. And we're all about discernment here. Uh, like, if there is a rule, like, let's explain why it's a rule, and always be kind of skeptical of how universal it is. Yeah, but that takes a lot more work and engagement and respect. So, the Christian influence of seeing the world as good versus evil. Yeah, and good people versus bad people. It drives me so nuts. Like, this was happening in the conversation this week about Lolo Overruled, who's like a leftist podcaster streamer who is being canceled for sexual harassment. And just some of the language people are using of like, well, he's an evil person, so now anything he says about anything can't be trusted and has to be thrown out. And it's like, no, unfortunately, sometimes people who are smart and do worthwhile things also then turn around and sexually harass women, and that doesn't, those things are both true at the same time. And like that's how that person got into that position of prominence, is because they were smart and talented and did valuable things. Like, that past is not erased by them also being predatory to people. Like, we have to understand those things holistically. You may believe that one of these cancellations, Isabel Falls, was a sense of was an act of senseless mob violence, and the other was an attempt at anti-imperialist justice, Anna Mardall's cancellation. At the moment, I believe that Fall's cancellation was a completely undeserved act of hate motivated by transmisogyny, and that Mardall's cancellation felt really fucking good at the time because of numerous misleading and manipulative things that he had done and said over the course of his career that were not the ostensible reason that he was canceled. I can't really say that leaking his home address did much to protect people being killed by US manufactured tools of genocide, or like any of the things Kiwi Farms did with regard to his cancellation. But the mass public censure against him did lead to him losing a number of well-paying patrons and a lot of public clout, though, which we might view as a net good. And I think I do. So I kind of personally view his cancellation as a positive outcome for the wrong reasons. And it was driven by some of that same desire to mock quote-unquote cringy disabled people online and trans people online that Kiwi Farms promotes. And so, yeah, I kind of look back on even being part of that and having some of the glee in mocking him for all that stuff is like, if not bad, then certainly low vibrational behavior on my part, right? Like, it was petty, you know, it was not motivated by justice, even if maybe it had kind of a positive outcome. However we might feel about these events, it is clear that the social technology of cancellation is a thing that exists and gets used in the world, and which we must learn to contend with strategically. What we variously call canceling / calling out / public accountability has been around since at least the days of second wave feminist trashings. Or more likely, for as long as human beings have been jockeying to other and expel one another. Canceling is here, and it probably always will be, so long as human beings keep seeing social acceptance as a fundamental need that ensures their survival, and the removal of that acceptance remains a powerful tool. This is an article, a very old article from Joe Freeman called Trashing, the Dark Side of Sisterhood. And it is from April 1976, published in Ms. Magazine, a feminist magazine. And it's about a phenomenon from that era in the 70s called trashing, where a member of your community in these kind of radical feminist spaces would start talking trash about you and kind of encourage people to turn on you and oust you. As she puts it, what is trashing? This colloquial term that expresses so much yet explains so little, kind of like canceling. It is not disagreement, it is not conflict, it is not opposition. Those are perfectly ordinary phenomena which, when engaged in mutually, honestly, and not excessively, are necessary to keep an organism or organization healthy and active. Trashing is a particularly vicious form of character assassination. Whoa, this is really extreme language, which amounts to psychological rape. So we can see here, interesting parallels to the present day. Anti-cancel culture people always say that they are opposing the overstating of harm. That's a big Clementine Morgan thing, where she says people who cancel are overstating harm. They say that somebody is violent when they've just made one mistake. And yet, interestingly, it is often the people who are criticizing the criticism who also overstate harm and say talking about somebody is psychological rape, or talking about someone online is going to make them kill themselves and it's your fault that they killed themselves. Like, these are things that a lot of firmly anti-cancel culture kind of figures say. They also overstate harm. The don't overstate harm people also, interestingly, use that same tactic. It's almost like this stuff is really subjective and political and rhetorical. So people say things that are kind of extreme sometimes. Trashing can be done privately or in a group situation, to one's face or behind one's back, through ostracism or open denunciation. It's worth a read, this piece, because it There are so many parallels to today. You gotta read old queer discourse and old queer like fetish books and stuff, because the shit people were debating back then, a lot more similar to today than you might realize. So trash talking and ousting people, it was very much a phenomenon back then. And also, back then as now, there was an element of subjectivity to it, where how you perceive it depends on the story you're telling yourself about it. And there have always been people trashing each other, and there have also always been people kind of playing the victim or overemphasizing their victimhood and of cancellation or of trashing, and those things have like always been all happening at once, and they're suffused with each other. It's always been just talking trash, really, but we keep making terms like trashing and canceling. It's such an acute experience, it demands a new word. Like, this is so horrible, it must be a new innovation. Yeah, yeah, I think people think, like, I remember things that were now would be called cancellations that happened in, like, rad fem groups I was in like, college in the early 2000s. Like, cancellation already happened, or trashing, whatever, but it looks a little bit different on the internet, but people act like it's a brand new thing. And I do think that cancellation can be an effective way to generate the collective social power needed to take down a large institution or public figure. I have used cancellation tactics against a racist security firm in my city, and a man who domestically abused me and several others. If cancellation is violence, well, sometimes you need a weapon. And that's why in my next piece, I will be discussing when and how to cancel somebody effectively. This is a link to a piece that I wrote on Medium back in 2019. I'll talk about this more next week on my How to Cancel piece, because this is an example of a successful cancellation I helped set into motion. But the LGBTQ Center here in Chicago, the Center on Halsted, for a number of years, their security company, Walsh Security, was owned by a man named Thomas Walsh, who had been kicked off of the Chicago Police Department for beating up a black bouncer in the Lucky Horseshoe, which is a male strip club, and calling that bouncer the N-word. Basically what happened was there was a fight between like the head of the Parks District, who was drunk out of his mind, and a bouncer who was trying to subdue him. And then this cop, who was also at the gay bar, at the strip club, jumps into the fight and, for some reason, probably racism, mistook the bouncer who was trying to like quell the fight as the assailant, and started beating the shit out of the black bouncer and yelling racial slurs at him. And this is the guy who owned the security company that was keeping, quote unquote, keeping safe the LGBTQ Center, as well as the entire North Halsted business district in Chicago for many years. And his security firm, surprise, surprise, being a bunch of ex-cops and racists, they would kick homeless people out of the center who were just there to charge their phones or use the computer lab. There were a lot of black teens who were there for day programs or just to have a safe space to be queer in the city and be inside. They would harass them just for being there and treat them like they were loitering, and kick them out, and made the center a very hostile space to really any black people or unhoused people who were there and were trying to get resources and community support. So this is an article that's all about that event. And I'll talk more about what transpired after I published this. But I asked people to call the Center on Halsted, to leave a message on the operation officer and the CEO's voicemail, telling them to remove Walsh Security and to spread the word on this. This call got picked up by a few local advocacy groups, including a black queer church called the Lighthouse Foundation, and I worked with them a little bit. We did a bunch of actions, and happily, the Center on Halstead did end there. After much foot dragging and excuses, eventually the Center on Halstead did end their contract with Walsh Security, and they replaced them with a security firm that is much more like de-escalational, not cops, the community response members and things like that. So better, I would say. And eventually, Walsh Security also got removed from the center on from the entire district. The North Halstead Gayborhoods Business Association stopped working with them and having them police events. So this was a cancellation that kind of worked, but it was because the information was there. I had the support of another organization. People really spread it, and we'll talk about it more next week as a case study of how to make a cancellation stick. You cannot do it on your own as one person. If I had just made this little post that I made in 2019, then the Center on Halstead would have just gotten some annoying voicemails and they would have blown it off. There is a lot more that goes into making a cancellation stick than just this, and I just happened to be lucky that other people joined me in making it happen. And so that's what next week will be about, how to make a cancellation happen. In actual practice, though, most of the people I see getting canceled successfully are trans women, women of color, and disabled or mad people who have done nothing to merit the vitriol they are receiving, and whom communities are already most poised to violently eject. And even when a person has done wrong and been called out for it, the size and scope of the consequences seems to be based on how easy it is to dispose of the person, and how many people already found them annoying, demanding, or inconvenient to be around, rather than what is just or will keep others safe. Quarian says, harm is such an undefined boogeyman. Yes. That'll be also in the piece on how to cancel. Don't use vague accusations of harm. Use the active voice. Say who did what. That's always so much better, because harm can mean anything from you spread incorrect information, not knowing you were doing so, and that had maybe some consequences that are regrettable, to like you were violent, you like violently attacked someone. And people will be mealy-mouthed about that to either minimize or to make something sound more sinister than it is. And here's a link to an article that I wrote last year called "Annoying Queer People Are Not Why We're Oppressed." We often, far too often, use how annoying we find someone as like this indicator of like their political value. It is the most socially vulnerable among us who are the least able to cope with a cancellation. The people with attachment disorders, unhoused people, people with psychosis or paranoia, survivors of repeated trauma, people dependent upon substances, people who cannot socialize, people who can't speak or write well or at all, and people whom others find scary. In their desperation to prove their innocence, vulnerable people do things that inspire more intense social attacks, like sharing huge amounts of unflattering personal information, profusely apologizing in a hasty way that can easily be picked apart, fighting and fawning with critics in the comments, making up transparent, self-serving lies, fixating on their cancellation to the point of obsession, using substances heavily, self-harming, and various other sins that mostly amount to being publicly distressed. The mob gathers when they smell blood in the water. And a lot of people on the internet believe that the worst thing you can be is annoying or crazy. Quarian said oof in the chat. I think a lot of these responses are probably recognizable if you are the hyper honest type of autistic. The shares more information than is probably good for me to share type of autistic. These are very common responses people have to feeling ostracized that don't generally help them, because they signal how vulnerable you feel, and They make you look desperate for belonging, which often means people like punish that in you. And it also, unfortunately, if you have people who are not looking at you sympathetically, they're not being fair to you, giving them more information is not going to make them be fair to you. It's going to give them more things to be unfair to you about. Like, sometimes you just have to know when to close that door. Like that, and that's a really hard thing to discern if you like trust people or you think that like the truth will win out. Reality does not work like that. And not everyone approaches you in good faith. And so being able to discern when you have a conflict with someone who, on base, trusts you and wants to engage with you, and you can be honest with them and work it out, that is very different from someone who they don't want to understand. They have no pattern of having listened to you. They never admit when they're wrong. And they're not going to do it then either. So that's something that might be kind of more broadly relatable outside the context of canceling. These things are all relevant to situations that are not just canceling. In case I haven't made that explicit, these are evil autism, social engineering strategies for dealing with certain kinds of conflict to cover your ass. This is cover your ass 101 for people who self-snitch often and get that used against them. Like, I am sorry that you live in a world where this kind of evil behavior is sometimes beneficial. I am too good at responding to these environments, and that's why I can't breathe, because I'm always playing three-dimensional chess. But as someone who's trying to stop playing three-dimensional chess all the time, let me give you some of my strats for when you absolutely must. Because I do this like strategic shit even when I am safe. You use this shit the shit that I'm imparting here when you're not safe. I don't want to see things like this happening anymore. And so I am sharing my tips for anyone who finds themselves on the receiving end of a cancellation attempt, be it large or small, and would like to minimize the fallout on their life as best they can. I also know that a lot of vulnerable people worry about being canceled constantly, and I think having a strategy for dealing with it in your back pocket can help quell some of those fears. Again, these tactics treat cancellation completely neutrally. For the purposes of this piece, I do not care whether you did something wrong or you didn't, whether some of the public censure you're facing is reasonable or all of it is not. My purpose here is to help you respond to what is happening in a level-headed way that does not inflame unnecessary conflict or lead to you getting attacked further, so that you can make your own decisions about what accountability you owe. I am not here to lead you through a transformative justice process. I'm writing this because I want you to survive and not make anything worse for yourself or anyone you might have harmed. Because I think some of this stuff, it benefits all parties, actually, to keep a level head. Quarian says, very tempted to change my Discord handle to evil autism social engineering. Scrum master. I'm a fan of your long meme Discord handles, Quarian. What to do if you get canceled online? Step 1. There's 10 steps. Step 1. Do not acknowledge the call out publicly. This is where most people fail. Most people fail at step 1. Responding to the call out will only further its spread and lend it legitimacy. Even if you make a post attempting to disprove the call out, people will interpret your defensive reaction as a sign of guilt. When you issue a public statement about a topic as fraught as a public accusation, it signals to everyone that something very important is going on, and it makes them curious to learn more, and ensures that the accusations stick more firmly in their minds. Furthermore, posting publicly about your accusations indicates to anyone who bears you ill will that you are rattled and feeling socially threatened. It rewards the behavior. This is a comment that Jesse Meadows left on this piece. They said, friend of the show, Jesse Meadows, Sluggish, said, I can't tell you how many times the way that I became aware someone was being called out was because they made a post about them being called out. Just a show of hands, how many people have had that experience where the first you're hearing of someone being canceled is them posting about them being canceled? So many times, right? Not being like super online anymore, a lot of times the first thing that I'll see is I'll just get online and I'll see this crater, like a person has made a post saying like, well, I'm responding to the accusations, I'm responding to the controversy. And I'm like, I had no clue there was a controversy. Now you've made me curious. I am not a pure person. I love gossip. I love mess. Now I want to find out. And so now I have questions. I'm interested. I'm engaged. And as somebody who was a fan of you and was just following you, I would have never known if you had not posted about it. Happens all the time. Closet the Demon, great name, said, I get so many Tumblr posts of people I don't even know responding to being canceled. Like, I don't even know these people, only that they're being canceled. Yes, there's a little bit of a main character brain that can kind of happen there. First of all, I never fucked my dog. No! Shane Dawson mentioned. It was, I never came on my cat. That's what he said. Yes. Yes. He literally... Shane Dawson is such a hilarious example because it was an unforced error purely driven by he wanted the amount of clout that Jenna Marbles got for canceling herself. So he decided to cancel himself. Does everybody remember this point in time? So 2020, Jenna Marbles, completely of her own volition, made a video that was like, I darkened my skin with fake tanner to play Nicki Minaj. I think in a video in the past, I made jokes that were not appropriate for me as a white woman to make, and it's not okay. And I'm gonna step away from being online for quite some time because I've just, I'm really thinking about this stuff and I care. And Shane Dawson was like, hey guys, I saw Jenna Marbles just made a video canceling herself and I thought it was really cool, so I'm going to do it too. I did blackface and I said various things. And then, like, it was transparently trying to get, like, praise for doing it. And then a bunch of people came out of the woodwork and were like, well, you also made out with a lot of 12-year-olds at meet and greets and, like, made jokes about coming on your cat. And I will say, I think it's okay to make jokes about coming on your cat. I think it's okay to play pretend. I think it's okay to make jokes about things of that nature. He also did very much do blackface a lot, make a lot of horrible racist jokes, harass black people who worked for him, and kissed 12-year-olds at meet and greets. So, like, that man sucks, like, on every level. So, But he... really unforced error himself on that. Oh, you have to go get your head shrunk. We'll have fun, Quarian. See you later on the VOD. I was aware of Shane Dawson because I was on YouTube that much. Like, early 2000s, like 2005, 2006 YouTube, that dude was on the front page whether you wanted him or not. It was Michelle Phan doing her makeup videos, and it was Shane Dawson doing blackface and, like, spitting up fake puke. And so, like, I would click on those videos being on, like, the front page of YouTube being like, okay, this is the most popular shit on here. He was the Mr. Beast of his time. And it was horrifying. It was disgusting. I was in grad school at the time, and when I most became aware of him in, like, the early 2010s, and it was like, this is what people are fucking watching? Oh my God. And then he became gay, and I was like, well, I'll give him another chance. And that was a mistake. So that's step number 1. No self-snitching 2025. You are just going to make people curious. You're just going to make people want to learn more. It's going to spread the accusations, and it's going to signal to your enemies, which unfortunately you may have enemies, people who bear you ill will. It indicates to them that you're rattled. Do not do that. This is also like what you don't do when you're getting stalked. You never acknowledge the stalker in any way because you want to extinguish the behavior, which means you do not reward it. If somebody's doxing you, harassing you, stalking you, you never communicate with them. you never acknowledge them in any way because that encourages the behavior. 2, do not act out of urgency. One of the ways that cancel people get themselves in far worse trouble is by spiraling due to anxiety and rushing to issue a statement about what has happened, or attempt to socially manage public impressions about what has happened. Do not do this. Anything that you say will be picked apart and used against you by those who are hell-bent on doing so. A hasty statement will not satisfy anyone. It will excite them. They've got your attention. They're controlling what you're talking about. That rewards the behavior. The situation is truly not as urgent as it might feel. A lot of times, doing nothing and being quiet is the best way to proceed, and the dust will settle better if you do. Let's say you did do something wrong. Let's say that you said something offensive, you hurt someone's feelings, and you're now being made aware of that. Let's say that's your situation. Even when that's true, you do not want to act out of urgency, because if you are still even processing the fact that you've done something wrong, you are not going to be making good decisions about what you owe to the person or how to even fulfill that responsibility, because you are in a state of panic and social threat, and you're still trying to make it go away. So when people feel attacked, their instincts are usually to minimize what happened, to try and undo it and make it like it never happened. They haven't reached the point of acceptance, accepting that it did happen and that there are consequences and that maybe the person they hurt will never trust them again. And they can't make it go away. And you have to really do a lot of work and give yourself time to reach that point of accepting that you did a thing that maybe goes out of line with what you think your values are, or that you hurt someone that you cared about. And taking responsibility for that and really dwelling in that is very different from managing public impressions and placating people that are mad at you. And so a way that a lot of canceled people go wrong is they're trying to resolve all of it all at once. They think if they make the right statement, it'll make it go away, it'll explain it away, it'll placate the audience and make the audience not turn on them, and it will somehow repair the damage with the person they actually hurt. And you can't do all of that at once. Some of those are goals that run counter to each other. Like managing public impressions and making amends with an individual are actually two completely opposing goals. You don't want to do the interpersonal processing in public as a performance. Don't do that. Don't do these things. And definitely, if you haven't even wrapped your brain around what's being said yet, and whether you agree with it, whether you think it's true, you're going to say all kinds of things that are going to make matters worse. So just go take a seat and think about it for days, if not weeks and months, before you take action, especially in the public realm about it. Hell, in the private realm too, because if you've just hurt someone, they probably don't want to hear an apology from you that second, because they're not going to believe it, and you haven't done enough work to really mean it either. Give them some space to heal too. Shit. Step number 3, very related, do not issue a public apology. If you truly feel that you have wronged someone, that conflict should ideally be worked out in private with the people you have directly affected. You do not owe the anonymous public audience a damn thing. Do not apologize for something you do not honestly believe you have done wrong. Do not apologize if you do not understand the nature of what you are being accused of. Do not apologize for how other people are interpreting your actions if you don't agree with that interpretation. Do not apologize to make yourself look better or to minimize the dust storm. It's not going to do that. It's disingenuous. It's not helpful. And it's not going to help your growth or repair. No matter how carefully you craft your apology, people will be able to get the stink of PR from it and will criticize it from a variety of contradictory angles. It is too vague. It over-explains. It centers you too much. It doesn't own up to your full part in things. It minimizes what happened. It's just for show. It took too long. It came out too soon to be heartfelt. You didn't mean it. Don't try to satisfy a public that is setting out not to be satisfied. Take time and really think about what happened and seek the counsel of people whom you trust in private. People issue these apologies that are very clearly directed at public opinion of them. And people can tell that it's crafted then for public opinion. That's not really an apology. That's image management. And people can tell that, and it doesn't help anything. So it's very rarely the appropriate course of action. Really, the only time where public apologies, I think, would be useful are like, if you spread information and now you want to correct it, okay, it's the public that you've harmed. It was a mistake that can be rectified through a public statement to an extent. And so, then you can do that. But that's really not that's a pretty cut and dry and open and shut case. Usually not grounds for fully canceling somebody. The one exception I will say here is if the victim or the survivor doesn't want to talk to you, then you might not ever be able to work things out in private. So don't be a fucking Sarah Schulman and harass people who don't want to talk to you if that's the case, right? Sometimes you never get to issue an apology. Sometimes you never get to resolve things. And people have their right to decide that they don't trust you. And even if you don't agree with their appraisal of you for their purposes might be correct, This, again, is such a white thing that I see us white people do so often. We want so desperately to prove that we're safe to be around, and we want to fix it if we did anything that made us seem like we're unsafe to be around. We want to clean it up, make it go away, win the person back over. And sometimes you have to just let the person decide that you're not a safe person for them to be around. They might be right. You might not think that you're super racist or something, but if you have enough red flags that a person doesn't trust you or want to be around you, that's their business. That's not your PR problem to fix. Sometimes the best course of action is for them to say, I'm going to keep my distance from you. And that might be the right thing for them to do. And you can't control that. And if what you actually care about in this example is anti-racism and being a better white person, that means letting the person think that you're racist or not safe to be around and being able to live with that and not crumpling into dust or making it all about you. And there's a lot of other realms in which that can kind of play out, where you might have hurt someone in some way, and to you, you want to see repair, but for them, no, I'm good. That's it. That's enough. And you have to actually respect that and be able to live with yourself, even if there are people in the world who don't want to be around you. At the end of the day, you have to be able to make that peace with yourself as a person who's hurt other people. We all have to figure that out in all walks of life. We are all going to do that to people sometimes. So how are you going to be able to reconcile that with your image of yourself? Step 4, do not attempt to disprove the call out unless you have crystal clear, smoking gun evidence that the person who accused you is actually victimizing you. And even then, probably don't do it. I have only seen a disproof of a call out work once. And that was when a trans woman cartoonist was able to show with receipts that the person accusing her of abuse had in fact been domestically abusing her. This happened quickly enough and with such overwhelming evidence that she was able to change the social tide, moving the mob from attacking her to attacking her abuser. I believe in this instance, both women involved were trans women, and I think that's a factor. I think if the trans woman in question here was being abused and falsely accused of abuse by a cis woman or someone else, it might not have worked out in her favor. Um, so that's, I think, something important to keep in mind. Slime Mage, have to head out, but cannot wait to see the tail end of this convo on the VOD. Thank you for being here, Slime Mage. I really appreciated a lot of the stuff you shared in the chat. See you next time. So this is something that largely played out on Tumblr and Twitter, this case, a couple of years ago. I chose not to use names here because all that would do is muddy the waters and make people get confused and think again that this prominent trans woman was the abuser. So if you know, you know. If you saw this play out, you saw it play out. But basically, there were accusations of having taken advantage of an employee. And it turned out the employee was also a romantic partner that had been abusing her. And there was very, very, very consistent evidence and a paper trail of that. And so it was one of the very rare instances where I saw a cancellation get canceled mid being released on the world. But disproving the accusations was still costly to her in energy and peace and public exposure. Excuse me. Having to rehash an experience of domestic violence over and over again for strangers is re-traumatizing. What victims of abuse most desperately need is to feel that they hold power. And you don't have any power when an anonymous audience of thousands gets to decide what happens to you. And so, whether you are the canceller or the cancellee, coming forward with accusations and receipts is not always worth it. Even if the facts are on your side, acknowledging the accusations in order to argue against them will only make people more aware that those accusations exist. See step 1. The people who are attacking you will be happy to tear apart your argument and even lie about it. And if the situation is at all complex, getting into the details will muddy the waters and make people find the situation confusing and troubling rather than clear. A lot of this will come back in next week's piece on how to cancel. These are things you also have to think about if you are a survivor of domestic violence or sexual assault and you are thinking about coming forward about the person who victimized you. Even if you have evidence, are you going to be comfortable wading through it over and over again? Even if you have proof, are you willing to relive your trauma and have people question you? Because they will still question you. And with there always being a pretty strong possibility that an abuser won't face consequences, especially if they're powerful, how will you feel if you air out all of your trauma, have your character questioned, and then maybe nothing happens? Like, will that still have been worth telling your story to you? And there's no one right answer to that. It's just something you have to kind of ask yourself about, what are the risks to me if I come forward, and is it worth it? And no survivor ever has a responsibility to do that if they don't want to. And it's very frustrating when people act like you do have to share your story just because other victims have come forward or because the time is right or something. It's always incredibly costly, and there's very little payoff to the survivors themselves. So whether you're being canceled or you're trying to cancel someone, it's very delicate to open up this particular, take the lid off of this and expose this part of yourself. 5, get the fuck offline. Delete your social media apps from your phone for the time being. Turn off all notifications. Turn off all DM requests. Turn off comments. Change your social media app settings so that you can only see engagement from people you already follow. Shout out again to Abigail Thorne, PhilosophyTube, who mentioned doing this on her Twitter. She mentioned it on Tumblr about her Twitter, that she turned off all notifications from non-mutuals. So she's had a bunch of instances she talks about where She'll have friends reach out to her saying, "Are you okay? I saw all these people talking about you online." And she can honestly say, "I don't know about that. I don't know what people are criticizing me for." Huge queen move. And she really stays above the fray when it comes to social media bullshit. And she has had a lot of it. A lot of people have said a lot of shit about her. And she does not get into it. She does not acknowledge it. She does not fight with people. She doesn't try to clear her name of any bullshit that people are like gossiping about. She just like floats above it. Even when she got accused of making a transphobic joke about Trump's transition before she was out as trans, she could have gotten so pissed off about that and people like criticizing her for making that joke, but she just floated on above it all, said nothing, and then came out as trans a few months later. And so everybody who came for her for making a transition joke while she was actively transitioning, they were the ones who came out of it looking shitty. So much to be learned from Philosophy Tube's whole way of dealing with being a public figure on the internet. I have taken many notes from her book. I have cribbed off of her notes quite often. If a light freeze on comments and messages isn't enough for you, you can put your entire web presence on ice for a while. Set your accounts to private and lock them down. Deactivate pages so you can no longer be tagged in any hate posts. Change your social media handles if you want to be especially hard to find. A trusted friend can take charge of managing all your accounts, go through your tags and message requests, and block anyone who is harassing you. Clean out your follower list of anyone you don't know, and even hold onto your passwords until you are ready to go back online again. But make sure to get away from the disassociation machine for long enough that you can heal and lose a bit of the heat. Online mobs do not find it rewarding to harass a person who never even sees their message. You do not need to know every negative thing that is being said about you online. The less you expose yourself to it, the better. Again, boundaries are a thing you do. How to be an influencer without crashing out. Don't read everything people say about you. In fact, good or bad, read as little of what people are saying about you as possible, because nobody should be thinking about themselves that much. It really fucks with your head. It makes you insufferable. And makes you suffer. Number 6, connect with IRL friends and loved ones. Social media dramatically skews our sense of social priorities, such that the approval rating of complete strangers starts to seem more important than the people we actually know and trust and who actually know us. You have to orient your attention back to what matters. Make an effort to get outside of your own head and actively engaged in the lives of other people. Go get a meal with a buddy, watch a dumb movie, talk to your grandma about her plans for her garden. Surround yourself with real people you care about and focus on their lives and problems to help put things in perspective. Let their personal victories and dramas help keep you from unlocking your phone. Think about other people. Who's on your nerves lately is like a great icebreaker or like conversation starter, an unsung hero of making a conversation interesting. Who's getting on your nerves lately? What's on your mind? What's been bothering you lately? Complaining kicks ass, as our friends the anime sickos often say. So worry about somebody else's problems for a second. Get them to complain, and you will have won a friend over for life. Number 7, remember you are actually not the main character. Not everyone is talking about you. Not everybody hates you. Most people have no fucking clue what has been said about you, and most people do not give a fuck about you, and that's good. When you're wrapped up in a cancellation, the negative opinions of a handful of rabidly pissed online freaks seems louder and more prevalent than it actually is. But usually, the number of people who are really dedicated to making you a target is small, and everyone else is just getting swept up in the show. So don't give them a show. Here is a stock photo of a black background with a round gray stone in the center. It's a gray rock photographed by Isaac Lee Shung Tan on Unsplash. And I've given the picture the image, "Go girl, give us nothing to criticize." So this is a reference to the phenomenon of gray rocking, which we'll dive into right now. Go be quiet. Be boring. Gray rocking is a well-established tactic for surviving abuse because it works, and it can be adapted to the digital sphere. Don't do anything interesting that can be used against you online. Let the devoted haters make themselves look bad by beating a horse that has not only stopped fighting and died, but gone off to a nice farm over the Rainbow Bridge where it gets to play with all the other horses. The farm in this metaphor is anywhere that isn't your social media platform of choice. So what is gray rocking? I imagine a lot of people here know what it is. But gray rocking is basically making yourself as boring as possible to an abuser. So gray rocking is a strategy that people often adapt as a survival tactic when they are in a domestic abuse situation where they're living with an abuser or working with someone who's abusing them. And you want to be unresponsive, uninteresting, unemotive. This is an article from the Cleveland Clinic about how to use gray rocking. Here's a few examples that they have on their site. Making yourself too busy with tasks and appointments to spend time with the toxic person. Participating in conversation as little as possible. This is a big one. So if they ask you a question, just yes or no answers. Really boring answers, not going into a lot of detail. I would not necessarily recommend using statements like "don't take that tone with me." I would say like the goal is to be as flat and boring as possible, because a lot of times if someone is abusing you, they are going to look for anything you say that they could take issue with, or even the way that you said it. So, if they ask you, if it's an abusive boss who's like really invasive and they ask you what you did on your day off, you might say like, "Oh, I didn't do anything," or like, "Oh, I just did laundry." Like very flat, where they're not going to get any more access to you, no more details on you. And a really important thing about gray rocking is that you don't want to seem riled up, because that can be very rewarding if somebody is trying to intimidate you. So when you're gray rocking, you like basically kind of want to act like Eeyore, like very depressed, very like flat, like my straight sona. People have heard me talk about my straight sona. Just very like, yeah, no, like you can agree with the person. Like if they say like, "Oh, I just hate her, blah blah blah. Don't you think she's horrible?" You just go like, "Yeah," or if you say so. Um, really minimal responses, minimal emotion. Um, Again, some of these examples I would depends on the context, like ignoring them. A lot of times if someone's abusing you, you have to acknowledge them, because they would further punish you if you don't acknowledge them. So you just do the bare minimum. Like you say what you need to say, but you say nothing more. You don't explain things. You don't say anything emotionally revealing. You make yourself physically small and don't take up space. I think that one is uh, pretty legitimate generally for gray rocking. Like you want to be just in the background, piece of furniture. No details about your life, nothing interesting, no emotional reactions. Wait, wouldn't the gray rock tactic also imply the info dump monologue tactic thing you said a few streams ago for neurodiverse people to use? I don't remember. I don't remember what that was in reference to. Sorry. If anybody has any other examples of gray rocking that you want to share in the chat, or times when you've used it to help just kind of minimize abuse, I would love to hear other examples. So feel free to put that in the chat. But really useful in workplaces, or if you're living with an abuser, to just make yourself kind of small and quiet. It's also a really shitty trauma response to have, and then when you get out of the environment that made you gray rock, it can be really hard to have a personality again. So that sucks, but people adopt it because it does help minimize being targeted. And so it is a good tool to have in your back pocket. And I think really great if you have an invasive manager or person in your workplace who's like very emotionally manipulative. Um, that it's really nice to just make yourself as boring as humanly possible. And it can be a little bit of a way to keep your mind occupied too. Just like coming up with the most boring answers to questions. And it's like playing a character. But the digital version of this is not sharing information that can be used against you, not posting and being active, not getting into the fray with people that are canceling you, and so on. Tip number 8. Find distracting, active, rewarding activities that bring you out of the digital space and into physical reality. There are so many areas of life that are completely fucking untouched by what a bunch of social media power users have to say online. You will have an easier time not fixating on your cancellation if you give yourself either a physical task to complete, a set of skills to master, or some new sense of purpose you can find rewarding. Go volunteer to clean up a park, run errands for a disabled or elderly person in your neighborhood, take an exercise class, foster a dog, regrout your bathroom, knit a hat, get all the way through a TV series, give yourself a project of some kind. Hop onto meetup.com and find local groups based on shared hobbies like running, visiting restaurants, line dancing, playing Scrabble. Somebody just shared a playing Scrabble, an online Scrabble website with me. So digital options are a thing here too, of course. Check out the websites for your local park district, library, or universities for events. Just do things that are not participating in the discourse that's got you feeling low. If you're being threatened with a cancellation, that means you're experiencing real or perceived social rejection. And one of the best ways to fight against that is to make lots of new friends from completely different walks of life. If you need to, you can follow basically every step in my Autistic Social Butterflies Guide to Making Friends. Finding lots of new outings will keep you busy and remind you that opportunities for connection are bountiful. Here is the link to that piece. Autistic Social Butterflies Guide to Making Friends. This really, if you haven't seen it, breaks down steps that you can take even just for finding social events, making that a part of your regular schedule, looking for events, putting them in your calendar, and then challenging yourself to go to them and socializing with people. And I will say here that like this article is very intentionally conscious of the fact that like if you're here, you're likely a disabled person who is online a lot and does meet a lot of your social needs through the internet. That's why this cover photo is a Zoom event, not an in-person event, because this advice transfers to both online events and in-person events. Eventbrite, surprisingly, has a ton of virtual events on it. I did not know that until a couple of years ago, but there's like virtual comedy shows that like a lot of like Tig Notaro does a bunch of, and hosts that a friend of mine put me on to. I've posted them in the Discord before. Classes, workshops, book clubs, etc. A lot of the things that movie clubs, a lot of the things that people just get together to meet for, people are also doing online, and you can find them on things like Eventbrite, different disability focused like Facebook groups and Discord servers. That's one of the areas where Facebook still exists. It can be so much harder to get the fuck offline and get away from your experience of being canceled or ostracized if the internet is one of your only like social outlet. And so like you can still do some of these things even though that is a lot more difficult. Like unplugging is so much more difficult if that's your primary way of connecting to people, but it is possible to say I'm going to put a freeze on social media or the social media account where all of this awful shit is happening to me, and I'm going to go play an online game with people in this completely other realm, or I'm going to get on a Discord server for a very specific hobby or community and interact with those people on a more one-to-one level. I think sometimes there's this pushback people have where they say, oh, social media is my only way to socialize. And it's I think it's worth distinguishing between the kind of one-to-one interpersonal contact of something like a Discord server or a private event and social media where you're performing yourself for an audience. Like you can stop doing that shit. You do not have to be on the posting websites. They help for a lot of things, and so it is hard to disconnect. But like, there are other ways to socially connect online that are not still being on like Instagram or whatever or Tumblr. Even if the worst case scenario happens and a cancellation sticks, it's really only among a certain very vocal group of miserable fucking people. There is a whole world around you that will not ever care about your cancellation, and you will have a life outside of this. Closet Demon says, I'm very online but suck at being social online, so I'm just lonely. I think getting out would be the best thing for me. Definitely going to read the article. Yeah, if you struggle being social, yeah, I definitely encourage you to check out the article and take from it what's useful and like start small, just make it like a weekly task if you can to find local events and put them in your calendar and consider that a menu of options of like, okay, now I know this thing is coming up in 2 weeks at the library. Maybe I can go. Maybe I'll invite someone I know to go with me and then it'll be social, or maybe I'll challenge myself to talk to someone. And if that's too high of a bar, which believe me, I understand, I really have a hard time going up to people and talking to them personally, then just say, okay, I'm going to go to this thing. I'm going to go to this type of event at least 3 times. I'm going to give it 3 tries to see if I get more comfortable, to see if there's any people there that I imagine myself vibing with. Because it really does just take like a degree of persistence in the right spaces, which just means like finding options, trying out some of those options, seeing which ones feel like a place where you can imagine yourself starting to get comfortable, and then just hitting it regularly enough, as regularly as you can, and eventually you are a part of it. And so I tried to write that piece as like a ramp of like starting with just finding the events all the way up to participating in the events actively, and then past that asking people to hang out outside of the event and making them your friend in a real way, and like just slowly increasing the amount of contact you make with the right people. And you can do all of that online too. It just looks a little bit different, and there aren't enough options for people that are online, but there are ones there, and often more than people realize. Step number 9, ask yourself, am I really being canceled or am I just being criticized? I saved this question for near to the end because I don't think a person can think clearly when they are in a state of acute panic. Regardless of whether you were canceled or not, you are likely reading this piece because you think that you might be. And when you're in such a heightened state of social threat, taking care of yourself emotionally comes first. But after you have followed the advice from tips 1 through 8 and are feeling more relaxed and regulated, I do think it is worth asking, was I canceled, or were a few people just disagreeing with me and I viewed it as an attack? If you have been attacked and socially ostracized frequently, it can be easy to mistake mild disagreement for a threat because you have a supercharged rejection prevention system that sets off the alarms early. You're hypervigilant, in other words. It may also be difficult to distinguish between criticism and attack if you come from a culture where people were never allowed to have open conflicts or disagree. People from cultures where it is normal to guess what others are feeling tend to be really freaked out by the directness of people whose cultures encourage them to just ask. Ask versus guess culture. Are we familiar with this as a concept? You may have seen infographics about it before. In an ask culture, you can just ask somebody for something. Ask them to do you a favor. And it can even be something that might be kind of a little extreme of an ask that a lot of people would say no to. because you're trusting the other person to safeguard their own boundaries, and you don't think that they will say yes to something they don't want to do. So under ask culture, you can say, "Hey, person that I only met once, I'm trying to move to your city. Can I sleep on your couch for 2 weeks while I look for an apartment?" And if the person is really social and, has the space and is cool with it, they'll say yes. And if that seems like, whoa, way too much for them, they'll say no. Like, I trust them to tell me where they're at. I'm speaking from where I'm at. Like, we can just make a honest request. Guess culture says that you don't ask a question unless you're pretty damn sure the answer is going to be yes. So before you even ask a question, you gather a ton of information, you observe, you drop hints, you see if the person responds to your hints, and only once you're pretty confident that they want to do the thing that you want them to do, then you ask and they say yes. Asking is almost not even actually asking, according to guess culture. Saying no is considered bad in guess culture. Generally, people feel a pressure to say yes to things. Von Mel is taking notes. So, for example, I think on one of the Time Theft Today streams, we shared a video from an autistic person talking about conversations in the workplace about like going to lunch, where people at work, coworkers, will like soft launch asking you to get lunch with them by saying things like, "Oh, what are you doing for lunch?" And then they'll hear your response and they'll go, "Oh yeah, me and so were thinking of going to this pizza place, blah, blah, blah." And then they'll see how you respond to that. And then only if they get enough encouraging signals will they say, "Oh, would you like to go to lunch with us?" So this is a very easy exchange for an autistic person to miss, because you'll just answer the question literally, like, "Oh, what am I doing for lunch? Oh, I don't know. I have a yogurt cup in the fridge." "Oh, you're going to that pizza place? That sounds great. Have fun." Not realizing that the person is trying to guess whether they can ask us. Versus someone from an ask culture would just say, "We're going to get pizza at this place. Do you want to go?" And you can say yes or no. Ask culture definitely seems a lot healthier to me. And it's also associated with a lot of racial and class dynamics and assimilation dynamics that we've already been talking about today. Generally speaking, it is people who are wealthy, white, and assimilated into Western culture who are the least skillful in taking critique, and the most likely to mistake differences in opinion as a fight or an attack. If any of this seems to apply to you, then your cancellation false alarm might inspire you to develop greater resilience, better communication skills, and a sense of cultural fluency. So, generally speaking, people from ask cultures, they feel comfortable asking, they feel comfortable saying no, they feel comfortable hearing no, and they also feel comfortable hearing more criticism. Versus from a guess culture, you're not supposed to ever hear no. If you hear no, that means you stepped out of line by even asking. And so there's a bias against negativity in guess cultures. And so that means in people who come from kind of like guess culture backgrounds, if they hear any criticism, they think they can't handle it. They like are too fragile to cope with it, because you're not supposed to say anything negative about me. Like, I'm supposed to just pick that up in the air on vibes and implications and stuff. So if you're really telling me, you must hate me, you must want me to die. Whereas in more direct cultures, criticizing someone is an act of love sometimes. It's a sign of respect. Here is a piece on Substack from Tech and T on ask versus guess culture. When unreasonable requests are followed up with, "But you could just have said no," exploring the clashes of ask culture and guess culture at home and at work. So if you're less familiar with these differences, check out this piece, because it really breaks down the differences between the two cultures. For example, ask culture expects that you will take care of your own needs and others will take care of theirs and advocate for them. Guess culture expects that you read an abundance of indirect contextual cues to determine if your request is reasonable to make. It's fine to ask for something that people say no to, and ask culture. It's rude to put someone in the position where they have to say no, according to guess culture. So if you've ever had the reaction of like, how dare you make me say no? You might have a little bit of that thing going on. People with large digital audiences are also at risk of mistaking critique for cancellation. Part of this is because of the sheer number of people providing them with feedback. Hearing that you're wrong 1,000 times hits differently from hearing it once. And when you can't hold a conversation with every person that takes issue with you, it's easy to view disagreement as coming from a faceless and menacing other. But it's also the case that the online famous think about themselves and their brands a lot and develop oversized egos that are easily bruised. If that's you, you have to find a way to get over yourself and understand that people forming opinions about your work is a natural consequence of being so widely seen. You don't have to read everything people say about you. Some people not liking you or your work does not mean you are unsafe. It is up to you to find ways to enforce your own digital and social boundaries and to regulate your emotions enough that you don't turn into an alt-right race realist the second a disappointed person of color is in your inbox. Not naming names this time. Final step, step number 10, make being online fun again. This final piece of advice is for the cancellation survivor who has really put time into disconnecting from the endless streams of notifications and mentions, found effective ways to calm down their body and reconnect with their true friends, and is therefore ready to approach the internet with a new perspective. Digital communication tools make up a huge, significant part of our social landscape, and the solution to its problems isn't as simple as disconnecting entirely and forever. A lot of people want to use the internet to express themselves and meet others. And for disabled, trans, or neurodivergent people, having access to its resources is all the more important. But how do you harness the social potential of the internet when it's already been used against you? I would recommend focusing your attention on small, relatively private spheres of interaction, using the internet to connect around hobbies and special interests that won't make you infamous. You're unlikely to get into as much trouble hanging out in online support groups for people aiming to reclaim their attention spans, intentional creative communities, or Discord servers devoted to extremely niche subjects. There's still some crazy beef in those places, but it's not quite like, it can't explode quite as large as like all of Instagram hates me now. When I got especially weary with my own online presence, I abandoned it as fully as I could in favor of Kinky Blue Sky and FetLife. Now, my doom scrolling time is devoted to looking at beautiful pictures of latex outfits and chatting with other kinky people about the ins and outs of negotiating long-term dominance submission dynamics and preparing a class for a virtual hypnosis convention that will be attended by members of my little community only. I'm pretty safe from being harassed or made into a subject of public commentary. Best of all, I think about myself very little in these realms. Find the pockets of the internet that still really amuse and excite you, and build spaces that prioritize personalized interaction and privacy. It is still the internet, and you'll still see your fair share of flame wars and community implosions. That's a word we don't use enough anymore, flame wars. Sometimes something isn't a cancellation, it's just a flame war. But you're not likely to be hurt so badly if you no longer make yourself a public brand. Social media platforms are generally going to be more hostile to the canceled than our chatting or event platforms. Though sometimes switching communities is all you really need to get away from the people who have harassed you or trigger you. How exactly do I find Kinky Blue Sky? I mean, you just search. You Like I just started looking for like latex and started following people and like follow chaining, like follow their follow lists and everything. There's a lot of great rubber stuff on there. That's like all my. I mean, I'm Pillow Imp on Blue Sky. That's my kink. Blue Sky. You can just troll my follow list and likes if you want. I guess my likes aren't visible, but you can just start there. Follow some of the people I've reblogged and or retweet whatever, reskeeted, reblued, whatever the fuck, and then just chain it out, make different little lists and stuff. Build your experience. Where can I find the Ask Guest Culture article? It's linked in my piece on drdevonprice.substack, or her account is right here. Tech and Tea, Jean Sue, .substack.com. And I'll have links in the VOD on YouTube as well. Find the pockets of the internet that still really amuse and excite you, and build spaces that prioritize personalized interaction and privacy. I already said all that, sorry. As I've written about recently, many of us were drawn to digital life by a desire to connect. If you were around for it, think back on the days of MySpace or LiveJournal. It was very difficult to socially ostracize a person completely on platforms like those. Though, of course, there were plenty of edgelord teenagers sending one another threats, and bored adults developing the most hyper-specific of beefs. Today, finding genuine friendships on the internet is still possible. So put yourself out there. Compliment an illustrator on DeviantArt on their work. Become a moderator for a Twitch streamer that you love, or attend a virtual stand-up set. Invest in those one-to-one relationships or getting to know people better. You can do that, where even though social media has conditioned us to be passive, to either be creating content to market to people or passively consuming content, but you don't have to live that way. You can focus on personal relationships and building them. Our connections are what we make of them, and you still have agency over your social life, even when thousands of strangers have made you feel hated. You can escape them. You will survive this. And there are so many wonderful experiences you'll still get to have, and cherished people in your life that you have yet to meet. And that is the piece on Substack. Thank you, everybody, for being here to listen to my long-winded, rambling read-through of it. And thank you so much to everybody in the chat for sharing so much of your own experiences, this stuff. Bon Mel says, what baffles me is that I've been struggling with a lot of stress and pressure regarding my Twitch channel. I talk a lot about leftist politics, which upsets the majority of people, and soft topics like emotions and relationships, which upsets the manly men in leftist spaces, so here basically the rest of people. And a lot of those steps are exactly the things I've been doing during the last weeks. Yeah, I also have a piece, Bon Mel, that you may or may not have seen about here's how to be a content creator without crashing out or losing yourself. There's a lot of parallels and ways that they kind of link into each other, this article and that article, because a lot of it's about what do you actually enjoy making? Like what things when you're streaming do you actually like doing and find motivating to do and not like exhausting to do or like re-traumatizing? And really make it that and try to like step away from the belief system that gets ingrained in us where you have to post so often, you have to go live a certain number of times, you have to do this thing every week to like earn the loyalty of your audience, and you have to deliver them what they want. Like, this stuff is a creative pursuit first and foremost, I believe. And so I think you should approach it as what you find creatively fulfilling or even politically fulfilling. Like, you can't do it all and be everything to everyone. And the stuff where you're going to thrive and consistently show up is the stuff that you already find motivating to do. And sometimes that means alienating the wrong audience. Like those leftist bros who hate talking about emotions. Like, Oh my God. I think leftism needs so much more of a radical mental health perspective that's like non pathologizing, that is mad pride, neurodivergent, like neurodiverse, all of it. Like, and some of those people just can't fucking hang with that stuff. And that's their problem because, like, we need to start having those conversations in these spaces, you know? Um, Pro madness, pro emotion. Yes, absolutely. I meant madness in the crazy sense, but yes, anger as well. Um, and like we get all this pressure to just grow, reach more followers, start making new additional forms of content, find a wider audience. But when you look at like what hits the widest of possible audiences, it's a fucking Marvel movie. Like, do you want to be doing the Twitch version of a Marvel movie? Probably not. You know, like the art that I like is the freak art for very specific people, and I love it to a feral degree. You know, um, that matters more. Like quality can matter so much more than quantity, and just remembering that like you are an artiste, you are a communicator, your artistic vision for your streams, for whatever you're making, that matters. Like it should not be done by poll, you know, because that results in pretty boring, unchallenging stuff. So like whatever that means for you, and that also means you don't have to pick a single lane and stick in it all the time. Like you, if you're feeling mental health stuff to cover one week, do that. If you want to do something more directly political the week after, fuck it, do what you want. Keep people on their toes. Um, that's what's kept me creating is just doing what I fucking want, and sometimes like alienating people. Yeah, Twitch Marvel be like, here's the thing. Well, that just happened. Ugh, 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 ugh. Yes. So yeah, you know, um, these places do not like they train us to have these really toxic like metrics focused, audience growing focused relationships to things. But like, I just want to have a good conversation, dog. Like, I just want to hear from people who are interesting and have interesting shit to say. And that happens more on here than on like Instagram, where I have 102,000 clowns just clowning around. Like, I have to put like a filter through it so like only the real freaks can like make it to the conversation, and then it's a much better conversation. So you know, fuck them. All right, thank you so much everybody for being here for this conversation. Next week, as I said, there's going to be a piece on how to cancel, how to use the cancellation art of war tactics to bring down an abuser, a CEO, a company that's union busting, things of that nature. So, so subscribe on the Substack if you want to read that when it comes out. I'll probably drop it on Monday, and I'll do a stream here for it too. Let's thank you so much everybody for being here and for sharing your thoughts. Lots of good convo in the chat. It's crazy that like if I was just recording this as a video, it would take like 40 minutes, and now it's like 3 hours. So that tells you how much value add there is from just talking to people and having people's additions. Um, and the VOD will be on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks for watching. I really like hearing from people who watch the video on YouTube and leave their thoughts and comments too. So thank you so much for being here and encouraging me in making these. It's just like a really fun way to scratch the teacher part of my brain, but teaching about whatever I want to teach about, not just shit that a university thinks will make money. So that's nice. Let me find somebody for us to raid. See who's stramming. And thank you again for the stream, Bon Mel. That was so lovely. Got a few new little followies out of that. Turbs doing 24/7 stream for 7th gen mutual aid. Oh, I don't know if I know Turbs. Oh, Condition Bleen. Martin, who was in the chat a little bit earlier, is streaming too. Boko no Natsuya Sumi Portable 2006. Um, let's see here. Let me check. Let me see if I'm following Turbs. See if that's someone I know. Let's see. What are they doing? Okay, so yeah, so I see I have their fundraiser on Shuffed. Yes, I see them. So what is this? So this is a fundraiser for a uh, Indigenous youth-led group to provide resources, attention, and care to community relatives. Cool. Sick. Sure, why not? Looks like they're doing a ice bucket freestyle or chat makes white post. I don't know exactly what that means, but they're spinning a wheel and doing some tasks to raise money for Seventh Generation Rising. So yeah, we'll check it out. Thanks for the tip, Closet Demon. Looks like everybody's ready to raid. All right, I'm gonna send you right on over to Turb. And say hi. Thanks again, everybody, for being here, and I'll see you on the next stream. Bye.